Good afternoon, everyone. Hello, my name is Kirsten Bayer, and I am with the Illinois Center for Specialized Professional Support at Illinois State University. And I will be your technical support and moderator for today's session. Today's session is IWDS, Local System Administrator Training Session. Today and Wednesday, we have these with Chris Thielen, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So before he gets started with his presentation, Thailand, sorry, Chris, thank you.
Like a bottle of Tylenol.
Oh, Thailand. Okay, gotcha. I apologize that I mispronounced your last name. And so before Chris gets started, I'll start us off with just some housekeeping items. So we are on a Zoom meeting platform. So while you do all have the ability to unmute yourself, we ask that you refrain from doing that. We ask that you post any questions in the chat. Chris is going to stop throughout the presentation for questions, and so feel free to type those in the chat, and then myself and my colleague Jordan Johnson, who's on here today, will help Chris facilitate those. We are having this session recorded, and it will be posted to Illinois WorkNet, and then both the PowerPoint and corresponding documents that Chris references today in the presentation will be posted to Illinois WorkNet as well. And I will also put the documents and the PowerPoint from today in the chat towards the end of the session, so you can feel free to download it. But we're going to strategically wait until towards the end of the session to do that. So if you're wondering how you get access to these things today, you will have access to them on Illinois WorkNet, and then I'll post them in the chat. And then we do have closed captioning on today for accessibility, or if you would like to save the transcript for note-taking purposes, you can feel free to do that. And I believe that's it for housekeeping. I'll hand it over to you, Chris, and then myself and Jordan will be here if anyone needs anything. Feel free to reach out to us via the chat.
All right, thank you very much, Kirsten. Like she said, I am Chris Tylen. I've been with DCEO since 2010. I have generally I handle the local system administrator trainings for the last several years. We noticed at one point in time when I first came on in 2010, everybody was experienced. All the LWIAs had local system administrators or directors who had been there for a long time. Nobody really needed any training. And then slowly, as 2010 became 2015, became 2016, 2017, we noticed that we were having a lot of attrition where these seasoned pros that had been there forever and ever were starting to retire. And some new blood was coming in, and these new people, some of them got great training from the people who handed off to them and that were retiring. And some of them got no training and were just told, so-and-so's leaving tomorrow, it's all yours now. And we decided to put something together because we were getting a lot of calls for things that in the past, the local system administrator just knew how to do. And I've broken into 3 sections, which is the first one here, which is editing the IWDS client screens. Later today, we're going to cover user IDs with the different systems that are involved with doing your job. And then on Wednesday, we have a section that we did for entities, locations, and relationships, because that is entirely the job of a local system administrator in the LWIA. And we found that this has been very popular and it's been very helpful. And a number of the LWIAs have responded that they use the PowerPoints from these presentations as reference guides when they aren't sure exactly how to handle something. So we've been adding to the presentations based on some things that happened during the course of the year. More recently, we added on here about transferring clients between LWIAs, because that was something that a lot of newer local system administrators didn't have the experience with. So it was something that was worth me adding to the presentation. And I think I did that last year or the year before. So if there's something that comes up in the process of this, when this is over, if there's something I didn't cover that could have been included in any of these 3 presentations, send me an email. Let me know something that you're unsure of how to do, but it wasn't covered. There's a lot of things that we just took for granted that like I said, the seasoned pros all knew how to do, and most of them are gone now. There's only like maybe, I'd say 4 or 5 local system administrators in the LWIAs that were here when I started. So to you seasoned pros, hopefully this is a good review. For those of you who are newer, I hope this really helps you get your feet under you so you can run, because that's what we all do every day with this job. We just run, run, run. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. Local system administrator training, editing IWDS client screens. These are just some basic acronyms that we're going to use in the presentation that most of the time, even in emails that are going back and forth between OET, Office of Employment and Training, and the local system administrators, which for purposes of this presentation I've abbreviated as LSA. These acronyms can be used in emails back and forth and other forms of correspondence between the OWIAs and the Office of Employment and Training. The DCEO stands for Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity. OET is the DCEO Office of Employment and Training. IWDS is the Illinois Workforce Development System. IWNC is an Illinois WorkNet Center. And LSA is a local system administrator. This training is not supposed to be a substitute for the trainings that Jim Potts offers on the WIOA training and the IWDS and the eligibility, or the kind of training that the performance unit with Paula Berry gives on their things, or for the trade trainings or other things. This is supposed to be an additional training, something that helps you to understand the different rights that you receive in IWDS with the local system administrator role. This is a supplemental training. So this training is just only really about what a local system administrator can change or edit on the client screens in IWDS at the different stages of the client record, including after the client's been certified, or how to submit for the client modifications when there are corrections and you need assistance from OET because it's not something you have the rights as a local system administrator to change. Now, with great power comes great responsibility, according to Uncle Ben Parker. Spider-Man repeats that in almost every movie, every comic, everything, and that kind of applies here. Just because you can change something doesn't mean that it should be changed. You're going to have the ability to change things within a client record that could affect eligibility standards that you already certified. So you might have somebody certified under basic skills deficient, but you go in and you have us alter or you change the test score, and now the person's no longer basic skills deficient, but you've already registered them as that in the certification. Those are the kind of things you have to think about. You have to think about how the changes to the client record can affect the eligibility before you make the change or before you submit the document to the monitor for modification. You could be changing the only thing that made the person eligible under BSD or low income, or it may be the only thing that made them eligible for dislocated worker, or for you change their age, it might make them no longer eligible for youth. So these are all things that when you're making the change, you gotta think just a little bit about how this is going to affect the eligibility and look at the certifications and how the person's certified. So this is the basic IWDS. Jim covers this with his IWDS training. IWDS has two distinct levels of client data entry. So there's one client record, but then there's a customer level, which has the most up-to-date information stored there. This is where there's only one customer level record per client. And this is where an IWDS user can manually update the customer level data at any time. You have this customer here on the screen named Ruth Aaron. Let's say Ruth Aaron goes out and gets married and becomes Ruth Mays. This is where you change it. You would change it in here under the contact information because her name has changed. Or if there's a new job that starts, you can put it under the employment history under customer menu. If they enlist in the military, you can do that here under veterans information because they were not a veteran at the time that you did the application, so you change it here at the customer level. So any changes to the customer information that happen after certification are all done here on the customer menu. If a new application is added to an existing client, so let's say Ruth Aaron has already been in IWDS, you guys served her in 2009 and 2014 and 2018, and now she's coming back in 2023. When you go in and you enter the new applications, that application information that you enter will overwrite anything that's in the customer menu. So when you create the application with her updated address or phone number or email, that all that new information, if it's different than what's currently in the customer menu, is going to overwrite the customer menu because it's now the newest information. As I said, the customer level is where the career planner or the local system administrator can come in and record any changes to the customer record after certification. Address updates, legal name changes, marriage, divorce, other, new phone number, new email address, new job, all the changes, the life changes that occur after the application was certified, those get done here. The one exception to the snapshot in time, that's the way that I've always phrased it because that's how Jerry Snyder taught me. An application, the application record is a snapshot in time. They are getting certified on 12/11/2023, so all the information in the record on that application level is going to be a snapshot in time. Time freezes for them at that moment. They only had 2 kids, they lived at this address, this was their email, this was their phone number. And then any changes after that go here. Well, the big exception to the rule is selective service. If you have a client who is under 18 at the time of certification, and then as you are serving them and the client is still open, they register with selective service after the certification date, we have to add the selective service number into the application because otherwise the application is going to end up getting locked up because they're in violation and don't have it in there. So this, when you update it in the application, it automatically updates the customer level, but it has to be done in the application. It is the one exception. And that's something where you have to contact the IWDS system administrators, which are Jim Potts or me, Chris Tylen, and we have to do this for you with the selective service number that you provide us. And just double checking that there was nothing in the chat. So we're moving on to application level. Application level is where the client services are recorded. Like I said, Ruth Aaron, she's in this particular LWIA. She's come in 2011 and was served and had an exeter status. In 2015, she came back and only made it to applicant. They never certified her, and she didn't accept services at the time. And then she came back again in 2019, and you only got as far as inquirent. And then in 2020, she came in, and now she's a registrant. But take a look at the names. In 2011, she was Ruth May. In 2015, she was Ruth Musial. In 2019, she was Ruth Mays again. In 2020, now she's Ruth Aaron. And all of these records are under the customer level of Ruth Aaron. So it doesn't matter what the names are if they're changing their names due to getting married, getting divorced, whatever. They're all going to be grouped together on the application level under the one client record. So the client is this is where all these multiple application level records are going to be stored. The client could be co-enrolled in WIOA and trade. They could have pre-existing inquirent or exeter records. Technically, if you have an applicant record and they weren't certified and didn't move on, we probably should go in and remove that record, which I'll show you guys how to do later. So each one of these application level records is a snapshot in time of their own. Each application should have the client's correct information, at the time of the application date. So each one of these, this information in this one is current as of 7/5/15. This one as of 4/30/2011. This is the information should have been right on 7/11/19, and so on. So if this client got married, moved, or had any other changes after the 5/21/2020 app that's right here where she's a registrant, then those updated information need to get placed on the customer level, as we discussed earlier, because this one has to stay whatever was accurate on 5/1/2020. As we talked about here, in this case, more than likely she was single in 2011, and her name was Ruth Mays. Then she got married and became Ruth Musial in 2015, got divorced again, was Ruth Mays, and then likely married again and became Ruth Aaron. I've actually seen an IWDS record with multiple applications under it, and the person literally has 7 different variations of their name, and only 6 of them were last name changes. One of them was a legal, she went in and she legally changed her first name for the most recent application. She no longer wanted to go by the name that she used to be, and she changed her first name, not her last name. And that one was really confusing for the career planner and for me, and we finally figured it out. But the career planner ended up having to flat out ask the client if she'd legally changed her name recently. So there can be some pretty crazy things. So here's a question just to get you guys thinking. If Ruth Aaron legally changes her name back to Ruth Mays due to a life event, she had a divorce on 9/1/2023, while she's still enrolled as an active participant as a registrant in IWDS, what needs to happen in the IWDS system besides a case note to the file? Change the name on the current application? No, because we're supposed to keep that a snapshot in time. Do we change the name on all the applications so that all the names match? No, each one of these things is time sensitive. We're looking at what was right on that date. Do we go in and change the name on the customer level? Yes, that is exactly where it's supposed to be. We leave the application level alone. It's to stay the way it was on 5/1/2020, and the new changes, life updates, go in the customer level. And that's something your career planners can do. You don't have to do that for them. And do nothing? No, that's not the right answer, but I hate to tell you, that's what a lot of your career planners think is the right answer. And that's one of the things that Jim is covering in his training. And you guys just need to make sure that your career planners that work under you understand that when there are life changes, it is important to document them, but this is where they go. They go on the customer menu. So, like here, if we're talking about a legal name change, they're going to go to the contact information on the customer menu, and then they're going to go right over here and they're going to change the name on the customer menu in that contact information screen. All right, so sometimes when a client comes into an LWIA, the career planner may forget to search for the existing IWDS record. Okay, I see. I'm just going to quickly answer this one for Paul because it's timely. In the situation that a customer level will say Mays, but the application would still say Aaron. That is exactly right. You'll change the name on the customer menu to the updated name. So it will be whatever name is currently on her driver's license or ID, her current legal name. And the application level will still say Ruth Aaron because that's what her name was in that frozen snapshot in time. You have it exactly right. So this one, we've got several OEAs that are currently dealing with this issue pretty heavily right now. So I want to make sure that I stress that while this seems like it's something simple, and a lot of you guys who've been around a long time, you're used to staff that knew to do this. Some of the newer staff aren't getting this very well right now. And it's something that I send out a PDF that's going to be one of the documents that you get that we call the four basic searches. And we'll get into the more detail here in a minute. But so the career planner forgets to go into IWDS and doesn't do a really good job looking for the client to see if they already exist, or if maybe they're already in here and had a legal name change, or maybe the name was misspelled. And Chris, I'll address that one at the break when we take a small section for some questions, because that's a completely different thing when we're talking about the gender stuff. All right, so when they find the existing record due to a name change, or they don't find it because there was a name change, or it was in IWDS and it's misspelled, or maybe they're misspelling it when they're looking for it, and they end up creating a duplicate IWDS record. And then usually this gets caught because they go to put in the Social Security number, and then they get an error, and it says that, you know, that contact system administrator, there's an issue with the Social Security number. So when this happens, the local system administrator should instruct the career planner to do these 4 simple searches. Jim Potts and I sat down in 2016 and we talked about this issue, and we came up with, we talked to each other about, you know, what are the things you do to look for things? Because when the system changed over from having the full SSN as a search option, and now we're down to just the last 4, life changed for a lot of us, both at the LWIA and at OET. And this is where this issue really got started. And Jim and I were going back and forth talking about what are the searches you do when you're looking for the client. And the 2 of us found that these 4 were the ones that we both did. And we feel that it's going to catch 99% of clients in IWDS that are already out there. And these 4 searches, if they're done properly, will take approximately 2 minutes to complete. And it can be done on either the customer level or the application level when you're doing the search. And the client that we're going to use here right now is Justina Thompson is the one that we're going to use as an example. If you take a look over here, the information that's handed to your career planner, this fictional career planner, is her name is Justina Thompson. Her date of birth is 6/5/91, and this is her full Social Security number ending in 3456. So, partial last name and last 4 SSN is the most basic search, and probably the only search that some of your career planners are even doing. The reason I recommend partial names is because the more you type in, the more specific IWDS gets about the return function. This works on any search feature, whether you're doing Google or most other, you know, computer applications, looking for something in a Word document, etc. So in this particular, you know, as an example, I say, let's say you're looking for a client whose first name is Mark with a K, but your person types in Mark with a C. Then Mark with a K is not going to be in any of those results. But if you just search for MAR, then you get Mark with a K, Mark with a C, Marcus with a K, Marcus with a C, Marchand, Marcel. Anything that begins with the first 3 letters, MAR, will come back in the result. But each a letter you add on after, like over here, we're looking for THOMT. Well, if the person's name is Thompson and doesn't have a P in it, then they're not going to show up because you've added the P. So, but in this case, I'm confident that the first 5 letters of her last name are THOMP, and her Social Security number is 3456, and that's how I'm going to do that search. I'm going to do it as a partial last name with last 4. If they get too many results, and there's too many IWDS pages, like there's 3, 4, 5 pages of results because of the partial last name, then what you do is you can add in a partial first name along with the partial last name, reducing the results. So in this case, we added JUS on the first name as a partial, should narrow it down even further. So it's only going to look for the last name beginning with these first 5 letters and only the first name with the first 3 letters plus this social. And that really narrows it down. 9 times out of 10, you're only going to have a one result when you go this far. So this one is something very basic that, you know, is easy even for the newest career planners to grasp hold of. Now, if there's some other things going on and nothing comes back, generally that's usually a pretty good sign that we've got a legal name change, or maybe we've got somebody in the system where there was a typo and the wrong socials on a different client. But these 2 searches will find things where the name is not important. So especially if you've got a female client, because they are much, much, much more likely to have legal name changes just due to marriage and divorce. Although I do have to say that I do remember, I won't name the LWIA, but we had a particular client who had come in and received services in IWDS, and I was still pretty green around the gills in 2012, still really learning IWDS. And this guy has come in and they're trying to enter him into the system, and he legally changed his name to his rap performer name of Shiny Nickel. So he was previously in IWDS with a real normal name, but he legally changed his name to his stage name, and they had no idea what his name, what it was. And we actually found him through search number 3, using the last 4 of the social security number and the birth date. That one doesn't do anything with names, doesn't look at name at all. You're just going by last 4 of social and the birth date that's on their driver's license, what they're given to you on intake. And that one, if the person has been in IWDS, it's almost foolproof that it's going to find it. The other search, and this is one that I recommend just doing first if it's a female client, use a partial first name with the last 4 SSN instead of partial last name. So you could have, if Justina had been here before and her last name had been Schmidt, you're not going to find her with last name of Thompson, but you are going to find the first name of Justina with the social. So these 4 searches are on a PDF that I send out, and it's also going to be part of the download at the end here, that I think that all your career planners should have as a reference guide, especially new ones. Now, let's say there has been a mistake. They didn't search properly, they didn't look very hard, maybe they didn't look at all. And suddenly you now have multiple client level records, and you are absolutely positive they're for the same person. Then we have 2 choices. We can either delete the bad record, or we can merge all the records together and keep the information of the one that you say you instruct us is the most current. Usually you find this problem because they're trying to enter the social and the social gives you an error. And I will interject a point that LWIA 2 just brought up. They don't use social security number with their searches in the resource room. They only use the birth date. You could do those same 4 searches, well, 3 of the 4, and use the partial name with the birth date just as well as you can the partial name with the social. All right, so here we are. We've got multiple records in the customer menu, and we're very certain that Jesus Mastin Basilio is the same person in both of these records. 9 times out of 10, first thing I look for after the name is the zip code. So we're reasonably certain these 2 are the same person. So we go over here, and this is where you have to make the decision for merge or delete. you look at two things. You look to see if the bad record has any case notes or universal services in them. If it has anything in the case notes or anything in the universal services, then you should request a merge, because we want to keep all of that historical data in the ways that they were served, or any information that a career planner thought was important enough to note. If there aren't any case notes or services, then I would request a delete of the bad record, because it has no benefit to the historical record of the client. We just get rid of the bad record and you go forward with the good one. Now, to request a merge or a delete, the local system administrator needs to send an email to the IWDS system administrators, which are Jim Potts and myself. And you need to include a screenshot of the customer records, just like the one on the right. And then you tell us which record you want to keep, has the customer level information you want to keep. So if we're going to merge these two and you want to keep the information on the one that doesn't have the social because it's got more up-to-date information on it, like where he lives, his cell phone, his email address, then you say that you want it merged into the one in line 1, or the one that doesn't have the social, or however you want to explain it. And we can have the record merged that way, where it keeps that information and adds the additional information, including the social, into it. Or in the case of if we're doing a delete, you tell us which of these two records needs deleted. And if it happens to be the one with the social in it, once that social security number is deleted, it will free you up to add the social to the remaining record once it's been deleted from IWDS. So I'm going to take a quick look at something here. This is a question point, and we had one question I wanted to go back to. And I was going to talk about the issue with if we have somebody who is identifying as a different gender. Here's the problem. I have to instruct you that the way that we've been handling this is that it goes to IWDS policy. The best explanation I can give at the moment is that we have been changing some of the field descriptions to where it says gender at birth, because the instructions we've been getting from Department of Labor is that they are going off of official records, not how they identify, because they could identify as something today and then identify differently tomorrow and then identify differently next week. I'm not making light of the situation. I'm just telling you what DOL has told us. They're going by official record. So we're trying to change the fields where appropriate so that it says gender at birth. And you can have things in the case notes where the person identifies as this and prefers to be addressed as this. But the problem is that if it's not a legal name change, and this is how they prefer to be called, then that's a case note. Unless they go in and actually have a legal name change, you are not to change the name in the IWDS record, because it will not match the records at DOL or IDES with unemployment, or technically it shouldn't match their driver's license, because they shouldn't be able to change the name on their driver's license or an official ID card unless it's been a legal name change. I can't go down to the driver's license facility tomorrow and tell them I'm tired of being Chris Pylan. I want to be Chris Robinson from now on. They're not going to change my driver's license without me providing documentation that I have a legal name change to change the name on the ID. And I hope that answers the question. But in the case of, if you have any further questions in this new reality we're dealing with gender identity, please make sure that you send those to Jim Potts and to me in one email. We'll end up probably having to bring in the IWDS policy, Laura Dom, to get you a clear answer, but that's kind of where we are on gender identity at the moment. I think that the best course of action for everyone is if we continue to update the name of the fields to gender at birth, which takes care of any ambiguity of the question. Now, Paul in LWIA 3, you're asking if we should could delete an application in a customer record from incurrent stat. Okay, so if we've got an application record in incurrent status from a long time ago, yes, we can have those deleted. You'll keep the customer level record, but you're going to get rid of the application level record of the incurrent or the applicant. Anything that's not a registrant or an exiter and it's over 90 days old, maybe shorter than that. I haven't done Jim's training in a while. It could be 45 days, but 90 days is a safe number. If you got something that's over 90 days old, especially if it's several years old, that's only an incurrent or an applicant, those application level records can be deleted. But then we keep the customer level because that's going to keep all the case notes. It's going to keep all of the universal services, anything else that you guys did to the client that didn't involve an application. And we also keep that information in the historical record, and it stays there indefinitely. And if they ever come back, then we've already got a customer level record of them, and you just add a new application. So I hope that kind of answers for you, Paul. We try to never delete a customer completely out of IWDS, but we can remove any application level records that aren't relevant and are no longer applicable because they've expired. Okay, so if you guys have any additional things about whether to merge or delete a client, feel free to just email me directly with the client, and I'll go through it with you and kind of tell you what I think and why. And it'll help you kind of get an understanding as you go forward. Like I said, I know we have 3 LWIAs out there that are having a lot of problems right now with your intake people not doing proper searches, which is then creating multiple client level records, which is not then causing the merge delete issue. So I think once we get them trained on how to search, and if you guys give them those PDFs and that information, I think this issue will continue to decrease dramatically. Okay, if you run across an issue where you've got an applicant file that's exited using an SSN, so LaDonna, are you talking about if the exited client has the wrong social? Okay, that's something that I will cover later on, but just to answer your question now, I did actually add this into the presentation, I believe. Anything involving an exiter needs to go through the performance unit, performance measure staff, and it has to go to Paula Berry, and you'll CC Jim Potts and me. And they have to make sure whether or not changing the social, which they have to do, we need to get it right. They have to see whether it's going to affect reporting, if they have to do something with the reporting issues, but it will go to Paula. And then if Paula is having issues changing the social, then I get involved and I look for the social security number on the back end using SQL queries, doing an actual full search of the database instead of being in IWDS. I look at it through the back end. And if I find that the social's already been in IWDS and it's under the wrong client, we make whatever corrections we have to do in IWDS to however many clients we have to get it right. There was an issue in, I would say, and I'm not pointing this out, I'm saying Chicago area. There was a big trend where when social security numbers were required to come in and even use the resource rooms, and I guess this goes from, it predates me. I've been told 2002 through about 2013, I was involved in the change request to stop it so that it wasn't required in resource rooms, because people would make up social security numbers just to get into the resource room because they didn't want to give their own. And because of that, we have thousands of records in IWDS from 20 years ago where people made up a social security number that's actually a valid social security number belonging to someone else, and that's the problem. So we stopped it. We weren't able to go in and completely correct it. We're having to correct them one at a time as we find them, but sometimes that's what happens. But anyway, if you do end up coming across an exited client whose social is wrong, that has to go to the performance measures unit. Anything involving an exiter goes to Paula with a CC to Jim and Chris. Okay, moving on. We're going to talk about the different things that you guys, as a local system administrator, have the rights to do in the IWDS system that your career planners cannot. So the first thing we're going to talk about is that there are 4 different stages of an application level record. So they've already come in, now they're starting an application. The first thing is an inquirent, and an inquirent is where the application's been started, but you guys have not certified it yet. So it's just sitting there, it's started, and like Paul's question, if you've got an inquirent record, like the second one here for Ruth Aaron, that was from 7/1/2019, and now it's 2023, this record technically needs deleted because it's not going anywhere and it's no longer relevant. They were never certified, never provided services. You never really, there was no cost outlay, no grants used, et cetera. And by removing this particular inquirent record, it's not going to hurt the historical record. You're still going to have any universal services or case notes there. The second level is an applicant. So you've certified the application, but there haven't been any services entered on the client yet. And that one's going to be like this third one here, where in 7/5/2015, Ruth Aaron, they certified it, but she never started any services. And once again, referencing Paul's question, it's from 2015. We're now in 2023. This one is also safe to remove from the record because it's no longer relevant. Nothing, it's not going anywhere. You can't add any services. It's expired. Number 3, a registrant. That's where the application's been certified and there's at least one service entered on the IWDS record. That would be the most current one up at the top. She came in with an application date of 2020. She's a registrant. There's active services in here that were entered. Now, whether or not the person needs to be exited and hasn't been yet is another story, but they have services. They were certified. This is a valid record and it will stay in the system, even if it's exited, because it's a valid record. The fourth step is if it's an exiter. So the application was certified, all the client services were closed, and then the exit screen has been completed, and if follow-up was appropriate, then it would have been completed as well. So if the application's still in inquirent status, the career planner has the ability to go in and make any of the changes necessary to the client because nothing's going to be locked to them. So technically, if your career planner comes to you and they've got a client, in this case, I made up Bobby Fieri, and they come in and say, oh, I need to change all this information. They came in on, well, in this case, obviously it was a 2021, but let's say it's right now, December 11th, 2023, and they first came in on December 1st of 2023, and they moved. Well, the career planner can go in and make all these changes on the application themselves. They do not have to involve you. You don't have to take time out of your day to do their job. Inquirent status is completely open, and the career planner can make the changes themselves. Then, if the application is in applicant or registrant status, meaning that it's been certified, then the local system administrator or the career planner can only edit the unlocked fields. Now, there's going to be some fields that are unlocked for local system administrator that are not unlocked for a career planner. So I would instruct the career planner to see if they can make the change themselves first. If they cannot, then they need to come to you. You can take a quick look to see whether or not you can make the change. I would say 80% of the time you're both going to be locked from changing it because it has been certified. And then you'll need to fill out an IWDS modification form request. And there will be an example of this form later in the presentation, but I'm going to take a brief second because I actually saw an email this morning from Jim Potts to one of the LWIAs, and it explained something to me that I'd forgotten. It was something I didn't really pay that close of attention to. I just accepted, yeah, okay, we need to do this from now on. Okay, no problem. But apparently we had an issue where the reason that we have to do the IWDS modification request and why they need to go to the monitoring staff is because apparently several years ago, there was at least one LWIA who had some monitoring findings and they were getting dinged for them. And they contacted the IWDS system administrators, me and Jim, or Jim and I, and asked us to make changes to IWDS customers because they needed corrected. We didn't know there was a monitoring going on, so we just went ahead and made the changes based on the local system administrator email requesting the change. And turns out that the LWIA then turned around and went to the monitors and said, what are you talking about? We don't have these things wrong. Look at IWDS. So long story short, no shortcuts anymore, guys. Somebody ruined it for all of us. If it's a minor change, Jim and I can still do them. Well, we may ask for some documentation. If there's some things that need done quickly, like a wrong social, things of that nature, those are still not a big deal. But we may tell you that you need to fill out an IWDS modification form and send it to the monitoring staff, which we'll cover later on who uses what staff and what region your LWIA is in, because of the issue that happened in the past. So a little brief history as to why we all have to do it this way now. So anyway, the local system administrator is able to edit more fields than just a career planner can, but that doesn't always mean that the local system administrator is going to have the rights to edit that field. I didn't put it in here, and it was on my notes that I probably should have. I think I cover it later when I talk about exiters. But any change involving an exiter is always going to have a modification form necessary. Once a client's exited, it's locked. Sometimes even the super users on the DCEO side can't make the change. We have to submit to the programming staff to do it because it's locked to us too. So anyway, the local system administrator can edit some fields, delete services, and even delete eligibility certifications in an application. From the application definition screen, the local system administrator is able to change the Illinois WorkNet Center, the assigned career planner. So if somebody leaves and you have to reassign who this client, who their career planner is, you can do that yourself. The only choices in these two particular drop downs are going to be specific to your LWIA that the client's assigned to. So in this case, the client's in my test environment, LWIA 15. And in LWIA 15, the career planners that are available are going to be assigned to LWIA 15, and the WorkNet centers are only found in LWIA 15. So you can't accidentally select a WorkNet center or a career planner that's not from your LWIA. If you try to change the contact date, you can, but IWDS will not allow the new date to be greater than the application date. So the contact date, their application date might be something like April 1st, and this is a typo, and you want to change the contact date to 4/1. That's probably going to work. But if you try to change it to 4/2 and the application date is 4/1, it's not going to let you do it. Now, this one, I don't know why this was in here. This is something that I'm actually arguing that maybe we should probably think about removing this. I don't know why we would want to not have the client show up in your my customers, my registrants, my exiters. But if you have this marked no, then in the shortcut menu for the career planner, when they go to look at my customers or my registrants or my applications or my exiters, this person's not going to be there. So if you ever see this that show on my applications as no, you probably need to change it to yes, because your career planner is probably wondering where their client went. Staying on the application definition screen, the local system administrator has the ability to delete the entire application. This is where Paul's question of can we delete the applicant or the inquirent if they're expired and we no longer need them? You guys can actually do this yourself. You can get rid of an entire application level record by hitting this delete button on the application definition screen. Here's where we go back to the Spider-Man quote of with great power comes great responsibility. Caution, this will delete almost everything connected to this application. You could have services, you could do it on a registrant. They could be certified, they can have services, you've got client data, test data, all the stuff you entered on this application, you hit this delete button, it's all gone. The only thing that it doesn't delete, it does not delete other applications, it does not delete case notes, it does not delete universal services, and it does not delete the customer level information. So the customer level is still going to be there, even if now there are no applications under it, but it completely nukes this application, and we can't restore it. Because that's happened before, and somebody came and said, hey, I need to get this back. Well, technically we could, but anything that we'd have to restore the IWDS system from yesterday's backup, and anything anyone did statewide since that backup will also be gone. So to restore the one application that you accidentally deleted, we'd be deleting 200 users worth of work over however many hours it's been since the backup. So it's very highly unlikely that that would ever happen. So once you hit delete, it's gone. Moving on to the next screen. On the concurrent program screen, the local system administrator can update any of these choices, but you need to keep in mind that it needs to reflect what was accurate for the client on this application date, not programs that they entered after this date. So if they're a current registrant and they're certified, then you're not changing anything here. In current screen, the career planner can go in and make these changes themselves. They don't need you. But if you're talking about someone who's an applicant, a registrant, or even an exiter, it needs to be what was on the application date. So if they turned around and entered, just to randomly select something, let's say that this person was a Native American and they got into a Native American program 6 months after the application date. That's not something you're going to want to do. You're going to want to leave this accurate as of this date. And that is something you need to stress to your career planners, that they need to make sure that everything, before they certify the client, they need to make sure that everything is accurate as of that application date, and then go on from there. characteristics and barrier screen, it does not allow you to make any changes at all as a local system administrator. Any changes to this screen after certification is going to require an IWDS modification form. On the employment characteristics screen, the local system administrator is only able to change the question of tenure or the dependent of a seasonal or migrant farm worker. Once again, this question, you should only be changing it if you're making it accurate as of the application date. And any of the other questions, if they are marked wrong, need to have an IWDS modification request form filled out. On the education status application screen, the local system administrator is able to change the Pell Grant recipient and the Pell Grant amount. Once again, make sure you're referencing the application date, snapshot in time. Otherwise, anything else on here that needs to be changed, such as in the case if we're talking about an in-school youth versus an out-of-school youth, those require an IWDS modification form after certification. On the test screen, the local system administrator is not able to make any changes to existing tests. However, the local system administrator and the career planner are both able to add new tests to an existing application, even if it's certified. So let's say, for example, that one of these tests was entered incorrectly. We're going to go to the maintain test screen to see the detail information of it here. And we're looking at the reading test for this particular person. As you can see, the local system administrator is not able to make any changes to the existing test record. Any changes to this test record have to have an IWDS modification request. If you're wanting to completely delete this record, what I recommend, especially when we're dealing with basic skills deficient eligibility issues, have your career planner enter the correct test scores, making sure that it's under adult basic education, not under other. Or if they need to enter that it's a college graduate, that goes under other, and then college graduate selected. Have them put in the correct stuff before you send the IWDS modification form to us to delete the ones that are wrong. Now, if it's something like this, and you've got a situation where this one's got a GLE of 10 with a scale score of 600, and it really should have been a GLE of 5 with a scale score of 420, that's an IWDS modification request that we can go in and make the change for you. But like I said earlier, especially when you're dealing with somebody who's got a basic skills deficient eligibility issue for their certification, be aware that make sure that when you're changing these test scores or requesting the test score change, that it's not going to remove that basic skills deficient eligibility. On the public assistance screen, the local system administrator can only change, hold on, we'll see real quick here. Oh, need to go back one. And we'll go back one more. Are you able to make a change to the actual test date itself? I think that Jim and I can make a change to the test date. If not, we'll let you know that. I'm 99% sure we can change the date as long as the date is staying before the certification date. So like if you've got the person certified here on 3/1 and the test date was actually 2/15 and not 3/1, I think we are able to change it to 2/15. But if it turns out that you've got the opposite situation, you certified the client on 3/1 and their test date was actually on 4/1, we've had a couple of situations where we've actually had to go in and we had to remove services, we had to remove the certification, we make the correction to the test dates, and then we turn around and then we turned around and made the correction to the test dates, and it changed what date the person could be certified. We did have some changes to the system where we were not able to make a couple of changes that we used to in the past. Seems that there have been some things that have come, and we've been trying to get them opened back up. But if you do end up with a situation where you have a case of where you can't enter the new test score for that reason, that it was locking you out and you can't enter it, then obviously do the IWDS modification request form. And if Jim and I can't make the change ourselves, we submit it to the programmers and get it fixed. We just need to make sure that it's not going to affect the eligibility and change the record. Question from LES 17 about the concurrent program screen. You had a customer that was in training and halfway through, they enrolled in a partner program. In a case like that, if OET instructs you to update that screen, then you do that and you case note it. But you need to wait until you are instructed to do so. The snapshot and time rule has its exceptions. We don't like to talk about them, and when we do make an exception to it, we case note the heck out of it. In this case, if it's important enough to the client record that policy tells us it needs to be added to the record, we would tell you just like that to do it, but we case note it, case note it, case note it. All right, and we're gonna move back forward here. On the public assistance screen, the local system administrator is only able to change the field down here at the bottom, the most recent date referred to by other federal or state assistants. The rest of these, if something is wrong on here on the application date, you'll need to submit a request form. Keep in mind that this is one of the screens that can really change an eligibility. Let's say that you had somebody marked as being either SSI or on SSDI or on food stamp, and they really weren't, then your low income eligibility may no longer be there. On the flip side, let's say that your person needed to be, they are on SSI or SSDI or on food stamp, and now you have documentation for it, and they were on it as of the application date. We can help you out with the request. You submit the form, we update that information, and you can actually go back and recertify the client for the same date and actually select the low income certification at that point that they were not eligible for prior. So sometimes these things can add eligibility options that you guys can go back and retroactively correct. Basic skills deficient, low income, things of that nature. Or it can go the opposite way and the change may remove that option, and now we have to go and, because they aren't really on food stamps, we have to remove that certification and they're no longer eligible as 1A low income. Paul, that's exactly what I was talking about at the beginning. There's a lot of times where some of these things are little things, and Jim and I still do those without any big deal. You know, some of you guys we've gotten to know over the years, and there's some definite trust and bonds that we've all forged with each other over the years. However, we can't let those get in the way of making sure that we're taking care of things properly. Because of the incident with the monitoring and somebody trying to pull a fast one, it really did create a lot more work for all of us. In a case of where it's a simple mistake and it doesn't affect eligibility and it's not a monitoring finding, those usually we're not going to bat an eye. But if we start getting too many requests for changes about a particular record, or if it's something where you guys know you have the monitors, you know, in your office, they're there that week, just do the extra due diligence and have the IWDS modification request form. It's a case of where I'd say most of the time, these little changes, we'll do them anyway. We may CC the monitor for your area so they're aware of it if we think that it's something that they just need to be aware of. But yeah, you're absolutely right. We could end up, if somebody violates the unspoken bond here, so to speak, again, and we end up with someone trying to pull a fast one to get out of some monitoring findings a second time, I guarantee you that we're going to need to have an IWDS modification form for everything if that happens again. So if you think it's something that is major, like a social security change or a name change, obviously those should have a form. If it's something simple, I would try emailing the two of us first, and if we feel like it needs a form, we'll let you know. But for purposes of the training, this is how I have to present it. I have to tell you that these changes would require a form, because if something happens that way again, this is how it's going to be. You'll need a form for everything. So under the family characteristics screen, the local system administrator is not able to change anything. Any changes to this screen, like if we need to add family members, remove family members, that all has to be done with an IWDS modification request form. This is a case of where I would say if we're changing family members around, I would definitely do the form, just to make sure that we do it right and case note it. Sometimes, in the case here where, they're claiming children, or it could affect they're in a food stamp household, or all these different things that affect eligibility. That's kind of the key here. If a change can affect the eligibility, if it's a big deal, social security number, name, eligibility, I would make sure that we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. Income calculation field, the local system administrator is locked out of this as well. They cannot make any changes. This is one where I would recommend, just because it can get detailed, it's best to do the IWDS modification form, because if we're changing things, you need to let us know which column, which row, the amount, and everything has to be accurate as of that application date, because this is definitely going to affect eligibility. So because of the technical nature of looking at the grid format of the spreadsheet here, we just need as much detail as possible to know exactly what changes need to be made to make it accurate. The dislocated worker characteristics screen. Once again, this can affect eligibility, determine whether or not somebody's eligible for 1D or not. The only fields on here that you're able to change is with the local system administrator role: displaced homemaker, the DWG disaster only fields of receive physical, tetanus shot, background check, and drug screening. I don't know that we're having as much stuff as we did during COVID and the disaster times when we were having, knock on wood that we don't have anything else major again with the flooding and the tornadoes and all the other things that could have come through that covered under the DWG disaster. I pray that no one in Illinois ever needs to be eligible for that ever again, but things happen, and that could be something that needs to be dealt with then at that time. But the rest of these fields, they're going to stay locked. If something needs changed on there, you're going to have to let us know. Probably should have a form, just because if it's going to change the eligibility or not. If it's something that's not going to change the eligibility, probably not as important for the form. We could probably do something, but when we're talking about something here, I want to highlight this displaced homemaker. Just talking to you guys as the managers of your departments, your LWIAs. We had an issue a few years ago where the only thing that this particular person, and they did it in LWIA 90 with a bunch of LWIA 90 clients on a statewide grant. All 17 clients under this one particular career planner, the only way they were eligible was because they kept marking them displaced homemaker equals yes. That was the only way any of those 17 clients were eligible. And we caught it. And when we ended up having to get into it, we had to get monitoring staff involved, and we had to get management involved. And none of those clients were eligible for any of the statewide grants because they were, as an example, they had a guy who his job was working for Uber as an independent contractor, driving for Uber, and he laid himself off from Uber. Let that sink in for a minute. So he was a displaced homemaker. Another woman, not married, and she had to move, and she called her a displaced homemaker. A displaced homemaker is if the spouse has to move because the breadwinner in the family had a career change. That's where the stay-at-home spouse is considered a homemaker. This is something that I'm sure Jim covers a little bit more, but if you have people coming to you, if they've marked someone as a displaced homemaker, make sure you're asking the right questions, because I don't think the career planners understand what that is. And if that's the only thing making them eligible for something, I would definitely question it before you move forward. Like I said, literally, LWIA 90, this career planner, all 17 of her clients, because I'm the one who ended up having to look them all up, all 17 clients were displaced homemakers, and that was the only way that they were being found eligible for the 1D statewide grant. It was absolutely insane. On the WIOA training criteria screen, this is something that you guys can update all of the fields, whether or not the assessment was done, who it was completed by, whether or not the IEP was done, who it was done by, do they meet the qualifications of the training program, is the training program in demand, other grant sources unavailable. You guys can go in and update these at any time. Just keep in mind, it needs to be reflective of what was correct on the application date. Typos happen, they picked the wrong thing in the drop down. Just make sure that what you're changing it to is the correct answer, and you guys are good to go. The eligibility determination screen, the local system administrator is able to add new title or program eligibility and certify it. So in this particular case, Bobby Fietti, she's in 1A. We got her in career and BSD career. But you realize that if you turn around and you put in the eligibility determination date, if it's, you can do it same application date or any date after it, and it turns out that there are other titles or programs that the client's eligible for that you didn't certify, you're able to add those. So that will appear here. So if you turn around and in this case, we put in a eligibility date of 4/1/2021. So it was a month after the original application date and the original certification. Turns out that you guys actually had 1D eligibility that you didn't certify them for because that wasn't what you were looking to do with them. You had them in 1A. You were going to go through the basic skills deficient career services and training services. Well, now you're thinking that maybe putting them in 1D would benefit the client and get you access to some additional monies that could help the client. You can do that. So if you click the certification date on any particular title or program, you're going to find that the local system administrator has the ability to delete the previously completed certification by clicking the delete button down here. However, you should be very careful to make sure that any related services to that title program have been deleted before you delete the certification. So for example, you've got somebody certified in both 1A, 1D, and you've got some services in 1A and some in 1D, and you've decided that, no, we got to change, we got a client change, we're going to get rid of this, it makes them no longer eligible for 1B, so we got to get rid of the 1D certification as well as make the change on the client record to make it accurate. Well, first thing you need to do is go look to make sure there's no 1D services, because if there are, you need to delete them. If it turns out that that service can be covered by your 1A that you're staying certified in, or whatever new title you're going to have them certified in as you're removing the old certification, you'll re-enter the service at that time with the correct title and grant. But if you're going to remove an eligibility entirely, a certification, then make sure that any services under that certification title are gone first. And if you're removing both career and training certifications in a title, you need to remove the training certification first before you remove the career certification. So you got to do training, then do career if you're getting rid of both of them. Now, this is something that some seasoned local system administrators know about when we're talking about documentation changes. So you've got this person certified in these two programs, and we go click the documentation, and here comes the documentation for it. If the documentation needs change because they marked the wrong thing, the local system administrator is able to do that. You don't have to come to the IWDS system administrators, Jim and Chris, to do this for you. This is something you're able to do yourself. You just make sure that you case note the file that and that you have the documentation in the file, or in the case of those of you that like to do the document upload, make sure that that document is uploaded to the IWDS record. So like I said here, strongly recommended though, if you make any changes to the documentation of eligibility for the certification, do a very detailed case note. Just make sure it's something that the next person who comes in, if you're not there to explain it, can read it and understand it just from your case note. Contact information screen. This is on the application level. Once the record's certified, local system administrator cannot make a change to any of these fields because it's supposed to be snapshot in time. However, if it's determined that driver's license, the one that you photocopied on intake, this should have been 400 East Monroe instead of 500, then you're going to turn around and fill out IWDS modification screen request change, and you're going to use the driver's license as the proof that the change should be made, because you've got something documenting that it was just a typo, it was something done wrong on the application date. However, if it turns out that the change was after the application date, we discussed this in the very beginning, you tell the career planner to go to the customer level and make the change there. If the career planner is saying, that well, if I make that change, you tell them, look, the snapshot in time, this has to be accurate as of the application date. Any changes after, go on the customer level and just tell them to add a case note. Anytime you're making a change or the career planner makes a change to a client, they really should be putting a case note in so that there's something in the history that we can turn around and go back and keep an eye on it, just to, well, they made this change, this is why the eligibility is no longer right, or they made this change and it was done incorrectly, so we at least know what happened and now we can change it back. I would just emphasize to the career planners that work under you that case notes are your friends. They're there for you to have a reference, so you know what happens every step of the way. And if you end up inheriting a file because the other guy retired, then you're going to be really appreciative if he put in good case notes. On the additional contact screen, the local system administrator can make changes to existing contacts and they can add new contacts. Removing a contact requires an IWDS modification form. And this is another case of where it really probably should go on the form. So like if, in this case, Bobby Fietti, she used her friend, Guy Flay. And Guy Flay dies and she says, okay, you really should have, tell your career planners that they really should have at least one good contact in here, so that if something happens and the person stops returning calls, returning emails, doesn't show up for appointments, you at least have someone you can try to contact to find out what's going on. In the case of where they listed their mom, their dad, their friend, and then they turn around and say that that person's no longer alive or no longer around or no longer in their life, just ask them for a different contact, and then go ahead and enter the new one and ask us to remove the old one. 9 times out of 10, I would just leave the other ones in there and put something under the comment that the person moved away or whatever. But this is something that you guys are able to make changes to. However, this is one of the ones where I have to say the exception to the snapshot in time rule. If they say that their contact now has a new phone number or a new email, go ahead and change it. If they say, it says to make the changes on the additional contact screen on the customer level. Yeah, the contact is technically not your client. If you want to absolutely follow the letter of the law, tell them to make the change on the customer level only. But if they turn around and if you guys make the changes inside the actual record itself, the contact is not the client. This is one where if the change accidentally gets made in the application level instead of the customer level, it's not as big of a deal. Matter of fact, I don't think it's any deal at all. However, for training purposes, this is how I have to present it because this is the letter of the law. Now, the private information screen. There's a lot here you can't do, and there's some very important things here you can do. You're able to change the race and ethnicity. If the person wants to change to prefer not to answer, if they there's some things here that you can do and there's some things here you can't. Obviously, that's something going to be with your local WEA policies. Some people allow that if they claim this, then that's enough for them. If they put it down that they have American Indian ethnicity, then they mark it. Some other people ask for something a little more, but that's going to go by whatever your individual LWEA asks. Down here with individual with disability, you're able to change that from a person with disability from yes to no. Once again, though, this is one where what we're talking about is whether or not it was accurate on the application date. If they became disabled after your application date, make the change on the customer level only. Don't do it here. This should be only as of the application date. If the person has, they're blind, but you forgot to mark it and they were blind on the date of the application, then yes, absolutely, you should go in here and change it. If there's an accident and they lost their vision a year after the application date, this is not where you make the change. You make this change on the private information screen on the customer level, and you case note it. These other fields down here at the bottom, the new WIOA fields of received services by State Developmental Disabilities Agency, involving the State Mental Health Agency or Medicaid HCBS waiver, all these other things here. Once again, I have yet to really see anything where we've had to deal with these. We added these fields, and I have not had any questions from the LWIA, from career planners, local administrators, anybody. Maybe Jim has. But once again, if these things were on the application date, then yes, change it here. Otherwise, do it on the customer level. And if you ever have any questions, obviously bring it to the IWDS system administrators, bring it to Jim Potts, bring it to me, and we'll probably have to involve policy to get an answer, because this is a section that, like I said, I haven't seen a whole lot of things involving it. And we want to make sure we get it right. That's what we're all of us are about in the LWIA and at OET. We just want to do it right. We want to serve the clients. We want to get them the help they can get. We want to get them back to work, and we want to do it right. Veterans information. On the veterans information screen, the local system administrator cannot change any of the fields. Any changes here requires an IWDS modification request form, and this is one that I would say definitely requires the form. If we're talking about something where we're changing their nature of their discharge, whether or not, what branch of service, their service date, anything on this is important. It's important to make sure that we document it and that we do it properly. If there is a change needed, fill out the request form, make sure that when the change is done that we case note it and that we make sure that we get it right. If the change happened after the application date, they left the military, they retired from the military, they were discharged from the military, they entered the military, then we're going to make that change on the customer level, not on the application level. And that is something that you should be able to do. Your career planner should be able to handle that from the customer level themselves. I do know that we did have a situation, it was during COVID. I think we had something where it was early in COVID when we first all of us ended up having to go and work remote. We had a situation where something happened where a career planner accidentally entered the military information for a different client on the client they were working with. And they caught it after registration that the military, this person's not a veteran. Well, what happened here? And it turned out there was a mix up. They entered it on the wrong client. IWDS modification form requested to remove the military, change everything to not a veteran, did not serve military. We went in and made the changes, no problem. We case noted the client. Those things happen. It's easy to fix. Let's just make sure we get it right. This one I'm going to talk about on the veteran screen because we noticed a few years ago, and I have to run a weekly report because sometimes people don't understand what priority of service truly means for the career planner. Veterans priority of service means that if a veteran client comes into your office, they are to go to the top of the list to be next for service. They are not to have to, quote unquote, wait in line. It doesn't mean that you have to stop working on the client you're already on and immediately take care of them. It just means that they're to be given priority of service and that they are now top of your list, because as a veteran, they are given priority of service over people who are not veterans. So if you already had two veterans waiting for service and now a third veteran comes in, he goes third on the list behind the other two veterans, but before anybody who's not a veteran. It does not mean this question asking whether the customer received priority of service. It should only be answered no, that they did not receive priority of service if they were deliberately denied priority of service and your career planner grabbed somebody else next who was not a veteran and worked on them before starting the veteran's file. So if you have no clients waiting and the veteran comes in and they are the next client anyway, that doesn't mean that they were denied service. They received priority of service, just there was no one to give them priority over. So I hope that that kind of explains some of this. We've gotten a lot better at this over the last few years. We've had less and less issues of this. I think I've only had 3 this year that I've had to contact the local system administrators and the career planners to ask whether or not the person was actively, deliberately denied priority. And I have yet to have a single one of these where the answer should have been yes. All of them needed to be changed to no. But that is something that just something for you to kind of keep in mind if you're ever looking over a client file and you take a look at this veteran screen. Did the customer receive priority of service? The answer should always be yes, unless they were deliberately denied service. On the list work history screen, neither the career planner nor the local system administrator has the right to change any records on the work history after certification. You can't add any new records here. If you need to add a job where the client was employed on or prior to the application date, you need to submit that with an IWDS modification form with the details of what we're going to have to do, because you all know how detailed the next screen is when we're looking at the actual employer record. Any new job that the client starts after the application date can be entered on the customer level by the career planner. You don't have to do it for them, they can do it themselves. However, the local system administrator can make some changes on the employer record that is here. You may not be able to add another job, but you can go into Mellow Cream Donuts and you can make some changes if they were incorrect as of the application date. Now, one of the things that has come up in the last 5 years is somebody said to me that, hey, they got they're still employed by the same company, but they got a promotion. I need to change the job title, I need to change the work address, and I need to change the wages. No, you need to enter a new job record. I don't remember exactly what we did. I think we may have put in an end date and then a start date because it wasn't like it was a dislocated worker situation. But if it was a dislocated worker situation, the thing that I would recommend is just enter a new job record with the same time period, or maybe the date of when they got the raise, and put the new wages and the new year and the other stuff in, because we're still talking about the snapshot in time here. The application date was 3/1 of 2021. If this person went from being a productions operation manager to a regional director in December of 2022, we don't want to change it here. That's not where this goes. I would add a new record for any promotions or other things. We're looking at what were they on the application date. So if your career planner comes to you and says they're now making more money per hour, they got a raise, they're now a supervisor, they're now a shift leader, they're now this, they're now that, I would just enter a new record. We can always, the information coming over from IDES is still going to report just the one employer, but we need to be accurate about what they were making at the time that they started, and then what happens along the way. I'm sure Paula could explain it a lot better on what kind of things they look at when they're looking at performance measures and things involving exiters and things of that nature, success stories and things. But obviously any changes like that, we're not going to want to do that happens after the application date. So keep in mind the snapshot in time rule. And the other thing the local system administrator can do here, besides changing any of these fields, is they could actually completely remove the employer from the application record. You should only do that I would only do that after double checking with IWDS local system administrators. I know sometimes we have records that come over from IDES. Those are usually the ones that are in all caps. And it may be that you have the same job listed twice because now you've got the IDES record that's been imported and you have the one the career planner put in. I would resist using your power here to delete this, and I would bring it to either Jim Potts, me, or Paula Berry. So any changes, like I said, that happen afterwards should go to the customer level. The exception would be for jobs associated with dislocated worker eligibility. Those changes do not transfer over since the job at the application level has the eligibility criteria locked. I see something that popped up here. IBIS records loaded in, wages of 0. Yes, if you have the wage information, you can take, if you've got some information that you can add to the employment records that get imported from IDES, yes, by all means, you can go ahead and do that. The only problem with an imported record is that if it imports again, it could overwrite and get rid of the changes you make. But I still think that my recollection, I think you should be able to go ahead and do that and get the wage data in there because, as I said before, obviously the performance measure staff can talk more about how that kind of stuff looks. It helps them with their job, but we do want those wages. We do want that information. It's important to the reporting and the measures and the success stories and the other things that we try to do. So, but yeah, if you have the ability to, if you have the wages and it shows 0, then yeah, I would go ahead and try to get that updated. So the exception that any job associated with the WIOA dislocated worker eligibility cannot be updated by the local system administrator at the application level. So if it's a dislocated worker, the dislocation job is yes, that's going to be completely locked and you got to come to us for any modification changes. Just make sure you have your documentation telling it just to prove that this stuff was accurate as of the application date, whether it's, just the client's word, however that, whatever you guys are using for documentation, you need to let us know. And anything that changes, just make sure those changes, you can document and prove that they were effective, should have been changed, that it was a typo, that it was wrong on the application date. Otherwise, instruct the career planner to make the changes on the customer level. Some services, not all, and it would make this presentation way too long to go in, and I'd be changing it every couple months to add new services and take other services out. So individual services, some of them allow the local system administrator to make the changes, and some of them don't. So from the services screen, the local system administrator just needs to click on the individual service record, and when it comes up, you'll be able to tell which screens you're able to change and which ones you can't, based on whether or not the field is open. So in this particular case, we're going to look at the development of an IEP under 1A. On this particular service, the only fields that the local system administrator is able to change are the grant provider, the provider, the weekly hours, and the comments field. Any changes to the rest of this are going to require an IWDS modification form, such as, we can change the end date, we can change the current status. We cannot change the start date. No, we don't even have that power ourselves. The local system administrator also has the ability to completely delete a service with the delete service button. And as I said, different services are going to have different fields that are locked and unlocked for what you can and can't do. And I started out trying to do this presentation, and I started out trying to detail all the different services. And I realized very quickly that I was creating a whirlwind of trouble for myself that was just never going to stop. I was going to be constantly having to update this, and I don't have the time. If I did this, I wouldn't be able to do anything else. So you just need to look at the service and see whether or not it's something you can do yourself, determine whether or not the change needs to be made, determine what the correct change needs to be, and then submit the information to us. If it's involving a client that's something involving monitoring, then I'd fill out a form. If it's something that doesn't involve monitoring and it's something you found, you could probably just get away with just emailing me or Jim or Paula, if it's an Exeter, and have us take a look at it and see if it's something we can get changed for you. If it's something we decide at that point needs a form, we'll let you know. The start date of a service, however, is something that if it's wrong, the only thing that we're going to tell you is that we're going to have that service deleted, and the career planner is going to have to re-enter it with the correct start date. We don't even have the ability to do that as IWDS system administrators. And to be honest with you, our programming staff is swamped. They've got a lot of different things going on with different projects, and they don't have the time where some of these requests we can ask them to do because they're important enough that we'll just have the programmer do it and save everybody some time. But if we did that with everything, then they wouldn't have time to do the rest of their job. So that's why we say, in this particular case with the services, if the start date's wrong, let's just delete the service and have the career planner re-enter it. So some services allow the local system administrator to delete the service if other services are already present on the client that require. Let me start over. Some services may not allow the local system administrator to delete them because there are other services present on the client that require this prerequisite service, such as the development of an IEP, such as there's a couple things with youth that they have to do these youth assessments or some other things before they're allowed to do other services. If that's the case, where you're getting a screen or an error that comes up on the screen, give us a screenshot of that error message. That dramatically decreases the amount of time that the IWDS system administrators have to spend researching the problem if we already see the error message. So anytime the IWDS system gives you an error message when you're trying to do something, or when the career planner is trying to do something, just get them in the habit of getting a screenshot of that error when they're submitting it to you, and then when you submit it to us, because it will really cut down on the amount of time we're having to spend researching the source of the problem and what's going on. It gives us an idea where to start. On the list case note screen, the local system administrator needs to click on the individual case note that they want to update. Local system administrators cannot delete case notes. Case notes that need deleted require an IWDS modification request form if it's something major. If it's just a duplicate case note, or, and I know this happens, we all have had it happen or seen it, you put the case note on the wrong client. Those, you can email the IWDS system administrators, and I wouldn't say it requires a form for us to remove a case note, especially when it's just placed on the wrong client. Now, if we're talking about something a little more serious, like let's say there's a case note in there about the person not being eligible, or there's some question about whether or not there's fraud on this particular client, or there's some other serious case notes, and I think you guys have an idea of what I'm saying. If there's a case note that when you read it, you realize that it's got a little more weight to it than just a normal everyday same day service, etc. case note. Things that have a little more weight to it like that, you probably should fill out the form just to make sure that we're crossing the T's and dotting the I's. We've had a couple of those over the years where there were some case notes entered. They were marked confidential for a reason, and they wanted to make a change to the case note, or they wanted to delete the case note, and they were not able to, and they needed to ask us to do it. And that's a situation where I would say that you really probably ought to fill out the form. From the maintain case note screen, the local system administrator is able to change what program, the note category, confidential, the note subject, and the case note field. You are not able to change the staff name of the person who created the case note or the contact date associated with the case note. If those fields need changed, then the local system administrator is going to have to request for the record to be deleted and have the correct staff member re-enter the case note, because whatever staff member enters it, that's the staff name that's going to be on it. So if you want the case note to read that it was put on there by the career planner, who in this case is a fictional person named Chris Daniels, if you want to make sure that the staff name on there is Chris Daniels and not you, the local system administrator, you can't enter it. It's going to reflect the person who enters the case note. Anything involving an exiter has to be sent to the WIO performance measure staff, which is Paula Berry and Mark Burgess. And then you CC the IWDS system administrators, Jim Potts and Chris Tylen. Sometimes these corrections could affect past quarters that have already been reported on, or it could affect other reporting issues, or it could affect other things that are part of reporting, or the different things that the performance measures do when determining outcomes. So the performance measure staff also handles exiting any clients that are over the date limit, as well as removing exits from clients because you need to make a correction, or there was something wrong on the exit, or they used the wrong exit reason. Anything of that nature, it should go to the performance measure staff with a CC to the IWDS system administrators. They want to have eyes on it first, or at least be aware of the changes as it affects their jobs and what they do. Local system administrator is not able to do anything on the general exit screen after the client's been exited. They have to submit an email to the WIO performance measure staff, and they have to CC the IWDS system administrators. It can also be submitted with a request for IWDS modification form to make changes. When submitting IWDS modification staff to the monitors, the monitoring staff are separated into one of three regions. You have the northern region, which has 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, 10, 11, and 27. This is for purpose of submitting modifications. I know that 4 and 13 technically are northern region, but you are assigned to the central region monitor for IWDS modification. This was something that came up in discussions with the monitoring staff as I was updating these slides. In the central region, you submit to 4, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21, submit to central. And in the southern, LWIAs 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, submit to the southern region monitoring staff. Northern region monitoring staff is Matt Hillen. Central region is Brian Tippy, and southern region is Robin Krallman. That is current as of today, and their contact information is listed at the end of the slideshow in the contacts. This is a copy of the current IWDS modification request form. Local system administrator should fill this out, not the career planner, and email the form and any supporting documentation and or screenshots, highly recommended, for the modification to the assigned monitoring staff member. Some of you guys like to CC me and Jim on it, and if it's something that's not that big a deal, we go ahead and do it and respond and CC the monitoring staff on it so that they're aware that the change has been made. We just need to make sure that we're keeping them in the loop. If you want to submit and CC the IWDS system administrators, Chris Tylen and Jim Potts, when you're sending it to the monitoring staff, that's completely acceptable. Sometimes we'll wait for the monitoring staff to take a look at it and approve whether or not the change needs to be made first. But in situations of things that are pretty straightforward, social security number change, things of that nature that are really straightforward and your documentation is solid, Jim and I are both prone to just go ahead and make the change and respond. If possible, when submitting the request for modification, please, please, please include the screenshot of the error as well as a copy of the supporting documentation. In general, anytime you're emailing the IWDS system administrators, the performance measure staff, or the monitoring staff about an IWDS client, it is best to have the career planner include screenshots of the error or the issue so we can see what's going on when we're reading the email instead of having to do a whole bunch of research on it before we can even get started. Transferring clients between LWIAs. Sometimes clients have a reason that they want to switch LWIAs. It could be a physical move, or it could be some other valid reason. To begin the process of transferring the client from one LWIA to the other, the giving and the receiving LWIAs need to agree to make the transfer. That is the number one thing. If one or the other doesn't want to make the transfer, it doesn't have to happen. It doesn't happen. It needs to be understood, though, that the gaining LWIA is accepting the client for performance outcomes and for all future monitoring or data validation that occurs with the client. And the giving LWIA no longer is responsible for it. The receiving LWIA does not have to accept the transfer if they do not want to be responsible for the client. Let's say you take a look at the client and you determine that they would have a negative effect on your performance outcomes. You can say no. Once all parties have agreed to the client transfer, the local system administrator for the LWIA, it could be the giving or the receiving, CCs the other local system administrator and sends an email to both of the IWDS system administrators, Jim and Chris. The email needs to detail the customer's name, their last force SSN, the WorkNet Center location, where they're going, and the name of the case manager who will be taking over the client in the receiving LWIA. So normally these emails come from the receiving LWIA because then we also have the thing in there where the receiving LWIA is saying they are accepting it, and here's who it's being assigned to, and this is the WorkNet Center. So I would say a majority of the transfer client requests, when we get the email, it's coming from the receiving LWIA. So the receiving LWIA has to state in the original email or reply to the email if it's generated by the giving LWIA that they accept the transfer. If we do not have documentation in email form that the receiving LWIA accepts, we're not doing it. Once all of this has occurred, the IWDS system administrators look it over, we submit the transfer to the programming staff, and then we will notify the LWIAs when the programming staff tells us that this has been completed. When this is completed, the receiving LWIA must receive the original hard copy files with all of the supporting documentation. They do not get the copy. The original documents follow the client to the new LWIA. If the giving LWIA wants to keep a copy of everything for their own records, they're more than entitled to do so, but they are to only keep copies, not the original. Here are the current OET contact information. We have some new phone numbers for almost everyone because we moved from, the Springfield staff moved from the Ridgely building at 500 East Monroe to the Myers building at 1 West Old State Capitol Plaza, and we're now getting new phone numbers. However, I strongly recommend that email is best because, you know, it just, if somebody's out of the office, you'll know. If you see multiple people on there, and I know Jim's out of the office or Jim knows I'm out of the office, we handle it. I just think that email is a much better way to submit things than trying to pick up the phone and leaving a voicemail. The information is updated for Paula and Mark as well. And here is the updated information for the monitoring staff, the 3 regional managers for Northern, Central, and Southern, the 3 staff in Northern, Central, and Southern. And Tamika Chisholm wanted her information added to this slide since she is the fiscal programmatic monitoring manager. So if you ever need to contact her, her information is here as well. Are there any questions on this before we take a 5-minute break and then hit the user ID? All right, take a quick look here at this. Request for customer record merge or delete. Should we send the IWDS modification request? No. Merge and delete, you can send directly to the IWDS system administrators. You can send it to Jim and me. I handle 90% of the merges and deletes. If you just want to send them to me and only me, I'm happy to keep taking care of them. Jim's got a lot of other things that he does, setting up some of these training classes and whatnot. And I kind of took the lead on trying to clean up these merge deletes a few years ago. So I think most of those come to me. And it does not require a form. If a transfer occurs while a client's an incurrent, do we need to follow that procedure? Honestly, I would say an incurrent status, no. What would happen in that case, since no services have been done, since no grant monies have been spent, nothing happened, what you would do is you would just, as a local system administrator, you could delete the incurrent if it's in your LWIA. And if they're going to the other one, let the other LWIA go ahead and start their own application record. Because honestly, with an incurrent, you only have 45 days to certify. And if they're going from LWIA, let's just throw out a couple random numbers. Let's say they're going from LWIA 1 to LWIA 4 because they moved. I think LWIA 4 is going to want to create their own new record if the one that you have is an incurrent. If it's an applicant, probably the same thing. I mean, you've kind of done most of the legwork and we have an initial contact date, but I would just ask the receiving LWIA if they want the applicant record or if they want to start over. The only time we really need to worry about a transfer is Because if they're an applicant and they're not going to receive services from you, I would just delete the certification and knock them back down to an inquiry. The only time we should be really worrying about a transfer of a client is when they're a registrant, because they're going from being served in one LWIA to continuing services in another. User IDs are a lot more straightforward. Very little has changed as we've gone and updated across the things. There have been, those of you who've been around a long time, there have actually been some significant changes in how you access IBIS, what used to be SNAP and is now all part of IES. So those of you who are coming in now, newer, actually have it a lot easier than the rest of us did as we've gone through all the changes to get to where we are. Some acronyms that I will be using in this presentation and that you can use when referencing emails back and forth with OET staff. DCEO for Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, OET for the DCEO Office of Employment and Training, IWDS for the Illinois Workforce Development System, IBIS for the Illinois Benefit Information System, IES for the Integrated Eligibility System, IWNC, sometimes with a star, sometimes without a star, for Illinois WorkNet Center, SDA for Shared Data Agreement, LSA for Local System Administrator, and a new one that got put on us in the last year, ASA for Agency Security Administrator with IES. Systems for user access. We have the IWDS local LWIA, as well as LWIA 90 within the Illinois Workforce Development System. Both of those require IDs. The IBIS system requires its own ID, and the IES system, the Integrated Eligibility System, requires its own ID. The different systems, the reason we're not all under one big umbrella is because they're all owned by different agencies. IWDS, whether it's local LWIA or the LWIA 90 statewide grants, is a system owned by DCEO at the state of Illinois. The IBIS system is owned by the Illinois Department of Employment Security, IDES, at the state of Illinois. And IES is a system that is jointly owned by HFS, the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services, and DHS, the Illinois Department of Human Services. So none of these are run, monitored, paid for, maintained, updated by the same agencies. That's why we have different IDs in order to access the different systems. In order to get access to the IWDS, IBIS, or IES systems, each user has to have a signed IDES data sharing agreement form, attachment D shared data agreement, on file with OET. The form should be filled out before they ever even get started in the IWDS system or anything else. This form needs to be filled out and submitted for the SDA liaison, which is Carrie Compardo right now. It used to be Janet Davis. But Carrie has to receive this either from me or Jim or directly from you. So a lot of you guys submit the shared data agreement form to me, and then I forward it to Carrie, and that's completely acceptable. That's completely fine. You can submit it directly to Carrie and CC me, and that's completely fine. It just ultimately, this form has to get to the SDA liaison before you fill out and grant them an IWDS ID. Whether it's being done by you, the LWIA local system administrator in your local LWIA, or whether it's being done by the IWDS system administrators, Jim Potts and Chris Tylen, for LWIA 90. The SDA form needs to be filled out, completed, and signed, and submitted to OET before those IDs are created. So local system administrators should not be adding any new users into IWDS without a signed data sharing agreement form having been submitted. You do not have to wait for confirmation. 99% of the time, you're not going to get a confirmation that we've received it, that we submitted it. You know, as long as you've emailed it to us and you have documentation of it, I submit to Carrie and give her a copy of the form, and then Carrie goes and enters it into what she does and how she tracks it and how she keeps record of it. The only time you're really going to get contacted by the SBA liaison about the SBA form is if there's an issue, missing a signature, it was filled out incorrectly, the scan was bad. That's about the only time you're going to get contacted. So don't wait for us to tell you that you can put the person into IWDS. Once you give me or Carrie and CC me the SBA form, you're good to go ahead and create that local LWIA IWDS ID. If the user changes their name or their work address or their work email, work phone number, then the local system administrator needs to submit a new SDA form for the user with the updated information. The work information, any of the information on the SDA form changes, you just need to submit a new form. They don't have to stop working. They don't have to get out of IWDS. You just need to get that updated form turned into OET. So if you have an employee, for example, who has a legal name change, either it's a marriage or divorce, or an employee that moves office locations, or they get a new phone number, or they're issued a new work email because you guys have gone from first initial last name to first name dot last name, any of this. Maybe your domain name changed, like some of you always did here not too long ago, where the domain for the end of your emails have changed. Any of that happens, you need to fill out new SDA forms for all employees affected. And just as another aside, this is something I just noticed. I probably should have caught this before. If you're making a change with the SDA form, make sure you're also updating IWDS with the new work email or the new work phone number or the person's name. We'll talk more about stuff like that later, but if you're filling out a new SDA form, just update IWDS as well. The IDES data sharing agreement here's an example of it right here, sample. You fill out the IDES data sharing agreement acknowledgement form, you have the employee sign it, has to be signed, then you submit it to the SBA liaisons. You create new IWDS staff users and new IWDS local system administrators. If you take an existing IWDS user and you're promoting them and giving them more rights or roles, you're able to turn around and create a new local system administrator or by adding that role to an existing IWDS ID. You don't have to create a new ID to make someone a local system administrator. You just give them that additional role. You're also able to grant and remove user roles of all types within the IWDS ID. We're going to cover that. You can re-enable IWDS user IDs that have been disabled. The system automatically disables any IWDS ID that has not been logged into the system within the last 35 days, and it's done every night. So if somebody comes to you at 8 o'clock in the morning and says they can't log in, and you go in and you change them from disabled equals yes, and the reason from long-term inactivity to where it's disabled equals no, and there's no disabled reason, and then they don't log in, and it becomes the next day, they're going to be disabled again. So when you re-enable someone, just remind them that they need to log in today. You're able to reset IWDS user passwords within your OWIA. If they go to log in and you look and you see that they're not disabled, but they're just not able to log in. Maybe they forgot their password. Maybe they're misspelling it. You can issue them a system generated password, and it's good until they change the password. That one does not have a timer on it. You also are responsible for disabling any IWDS users who are no longer employed by your OWIA. And I ask that because I've been having to do a lot more user audits and a lot more frequently. I ask that you try to do this as timely as possible when somebody leaves. You can always re-enable a user that you've deactivated if you bring them back on contract, or if they come back, they decide that they're not really retiring, you know, or you rehire them. As long as it hasn't been a long period of time, like let's say they left last year and now they're coming back a year later, I'd give them a new ID. But if they left last week and they decided they'd like to come back and you rehire them and it's only been a week, I would just re-enable the old ID. So we'll cover a lot of this stuff pretty quickly coming up. Creating a new user in IWDS. It's required, anything with a star, that you put in the first name, the last name, the phone number. We ask that you use their work phone number, not their personal numbers. Their email address, we really would prefer that you put their work email and not their Hotmail or their Yahoo, or even some old ones will recognize when I say their AOL ID. We want their work email, the one that you're issuing to them as your employee. And then the OWIA is automatically filled based on the local system administrator who's creating the ID. So if you're the local system administrator for OWIA 16, then you're going to be able to create IDs that are automatically under you in OWIA 16. You have your choices for the Illinois WorkNet centers that will be based on what OWIA the local system administrator is from. And then the veteran staff drop down. When you're picking your partner, the Illinois WorkNet Center partner field drop down has the following choices. The last choice in the drop down is always going to be the one that's associated with the local system administrator's OWIA. 99% of the time, this is the WorkNet partner field you should be selecting, because they're going to be an OWIA employee. You want to select that they are working for that OWIA. When the user is filled out, this is how it should look when completed. When you click save, it's going to the system, gives a username, a last login date, then it's got first, last, phone, email, WorkNet Center, WorkNet Partner, and I have never seen anybody do anything other than non-veteran staff. I think this is another holdover from the previous system, or something that they did prior to 2010. The roles that you assign to the user, I have a PDF that describes what each role allows them to do. That's something you'll be able to download here at the end of this, and it will also be posted with the recording. It explains what each one of these roles are, what rights it allows them to have. So each role allows users to access different features of IWDS. There are roles that are view only, roles that are only data entry, roles that only allow them to access to run reports. There's a supervisor role that gives them some additional abilities over a regular career planner, but not as many as a local system administrator. There's really not enough of a difference to really go into what that is. You'll see what those are when you look at the ID role document. And then, of course, there is the local system administrator role, which is the most powerful role that a local system administrator can add to one of the employees at their OWIA. Select the IWDS user roles based on the user's position at the OWIA, career, whether they're a career planner, a grant manager, a supervisor. In a lot of cases, as you've been at an OWIA for a while, you kind of have an idea of, well, I want to give them the same rights as this employee. Well, then go make a screenshot of that employee and then put those rights on the new one. That's the way that I do it myself. You know, if I'm putting in a new IWDS LWIA 90 ID and they say they want the person to have the same rights as this other career planner that's LWIA 90, then I do the same thing. I make a screenshot of their roles and I do that. If I've got a new OET staff member and they want that staff member to have the same rights as this other staff member or monitoring staff, I do it too. So it's just a simple shortcut that as a local system administrator that I would recommend to you. If you're creating a new client or a new IWDS ID and you want them to have the same rights as someone else, just go to that other person first and make a screenshot of their rights. When you create the IWDS user, IWDS gives you a pop-up message at the top of the screen that gives you the new IWDS username. In this case, the person's name was sample user. Well, IWDS normally looks to use first initial, last name, up to so many letters as the ID. I believe it's limited to 8 letters and then it starts adding numbers. So, for example, sample user, it was already in the system, then it would create S user 1 or S user 2 or S user 3, etc. So it's always going to be a unique ID when you create a new IWDS user. Even if you've got someone who comes back and let's say, I don't know that this is the situation, but let's say we got an LE out there who has a summer hire and this person only works June, July, August every year, but they've got experience and you like having them around. Well, I would recommend creating a new user ID for them every time they come back. And you may end up with S user 1, S user 2, S user 3, S user 4, S user 5, because they are not a continuous employee the whole time. And if somebody's gone a significant amount of time, and I would say significant being at least 6 weeks, I would create a new user ID. I wouldn't give them their old one back. Now, if they're on leave or maternity leave or disability leave or any other thing like that, then obviously do whatever it is you guys do with your local policy. If you're not marking them as no longer employed and they're just out on leave or on absence, I would leave it alone. I think you're fine. IWDS also automatically creates a brand new Illinois WorkNet user ID and password for the user when it creates the IWDS ID. Now, if they've already got an Illinois WorkNet ID of their own, and they're already been in Illinois WorkNet prior to you creating the IWDS ID, that's not a DCEO OET issue. That's an Illinois WorkNet issue. You can ask WorkNet to get rid of one of the IDs, but that's not something that the IWDS system administrators handle because Illinois WorkNet is not our program. We're not, that's something that's managed by someone else. As a local system administrator, sometimes you'll have to re-enable disabled users and reset their passwords. IWDS, like I said, automatically disables any user that hasn't logged into the system in the past 35 days. And the far right column, when you're looking at the user, tells you whether they are enabled or not. N is no, Y is yes. If the person is disabled, you'll go in and when you look at them, they're going to look like this. Enabled equals no, and there'll be a disabled reason of long-term inactivity because they did not log in the last 35 days. You have to do 2 separate tasks here. I have tried over the years to figure out a way to do it in 1 step and you can't. And it's not worth trying to make it 1 step because it would be too big of a system change. What you have to do is treat it as 2 separate tasks. You have to re-enable the ID and you have to do a password reset. You cannot do both at the same time. And you need to re-enable them first. That's just, you can do it in either order, but I just find that it's the pattern that makes the most sense, and it just becomes natural when you do it this way. Enable them first. You change the enabled reason from no to yes, and you have to change the disabled reason from whatever reason's assigned here to the blank again. When you re-enable them, it's only good the same day. That doesn't reset the clock. They're still on the, if they don't log in within 35 days, auto disable feature. If they don't log in today and you re-enabled them today, they're going to be disabled again tomorrow overnight. The system, whatever time it does, it's going to disable any user that hasn't logged in with that within the last 35 days. I think it happened somewhere between 1 and 2 a.m. and they'll be disabled again. Once you've re-enabled them and you hit save, then you go back in and you click the reset password button. IWDS gives you generates a pop-up message with a temporary password that it assigns. This password is good until it's used. So you don't have to redo it unless they lock it, even if they lock themselves out again because they type it in wrong and they type 3692833. Well, the password is still 3692834 until they successfully log in, and then the system will force them to change it to a password that they choose. So I usually re-enable, then I do the reset password, and I just do a screenshot of the pop-up message and I just email it to them. Now, some information that you have at your fingertips is that last login. It's at the top of every IWDS user. If you've got a user that is telling you that they're in there and they're doing their job, but you go in and you look at their last login and it was November and it's December 11th, then you've got a pretty good idea that something's going on. If you ever see anything like this where it's last login of 01/01/1900, it means they've never logged into IWDS. So you created the ID, you gave them the ID information, and they never logged in ever. IWDS user deactivation. Like I said, we've been doing a lot of user audits lately. I am having to do them more frequently. This is very, very important. Disabling an IWDS user that's left, all you got to do is go in here, you change the enabled reason from yes to no. You change the reason to no longer employed by partner, or whichever disabled reason fits. 99% of the time for you guys, it's going to be no longer employed by partner. And then you click save at the bottom and it will update the information. Because we are a historical legacy system, we do not delete users ever. Once you create a user, it's in there forever. Even if you accidentally create the user and then you create them again because you forgot, you need to go in and disable them for reason of duplicate ID entered. That's really one of the drop downs. And there's a couple dozen of those out in IWDS. It happens. Nobody's gonna point and laugh. You just make sure you're using the correct reason. If the reason is that they had a second ID created by accident, just mark that it was a duplicate ID like the drop down says. But just make sure that you're doing this in a timely manner. I prefer within 24 to 48 hours of the person leaving your employment. Within a week, I'm not going to be upset. Once we start getting past a week, you probably should have got that done already. It is the responsibility of the OWIA local system administrator to deactivate any OWIA employee or subcontractor that is no longer employed by the OWIA in a timely manner. Preferably, disable the user the same day the employment was terminated. Like I said, 24 to 48 hours, I'm not going to be upset with. If you get it done the same week, probably not going to be upset with you. I find it, yeah, somebody screwed up. So please make sure to notify the IWDS system administrators that the employee left employment and that you have deactivated them, because I have to send something to the SBA liaison, and I need to go in and make sure that they don't have any IWDS LWIA 90 accounts that are still open that I need to close on my end as the IWDS LWIA 90 system administrator. The local system administrators are the only people at the LWIA who have the authorization to request user access or removal for IBIS, IES, or IWDS. So if you've got someone who's just a career planner at your LWIA and they email me wanting to get access to IBIS, my answer is going to be no. I'm going to tell them who the local system administrators are for their LWIA, and I'm going to tell them they need to go talk to you or one of the people on that list. It's the same with IES. It's the same with IWDS LWIA 90. The requests have to come from someone who is on my local system administrator report that I run for that list of LWIA local system administrators and IWDS. I update that list. If you send me something and someone on that list has left your employment, I delete them off my list. I run the report on the first of every month. If there's a new local system administrator who I didn't previously have on the list, I add them. If you make someone a local system administrator and tell me about it on the 17th of the month, I'm going to go out there and add them that day that you tell me. I try to keep that list as current as possible so we know who has the authority to make change requests and to make user access requests. LWIA 90 is the statewide grants within IWDS system. Just because you're an LWIA local system administrator for your local doesn't mean that you're going to be an LWIA 90 statewide grants local system administrator. That falls to Jim Potts and Chris Tynan. We are the two IWDS local system administrators for LWIA 90. We have to create any IDs. If someone is getting access to LWIA 90, we request that the request should come through the OET grant manager or by the local system administrator for the local with the grant manager CC'd on the email so that we know that this is approved. And the grant managers have to approve the LWIA 90 statewide grant users. All LWIA 90 users have to have a data sharing agreement acknowledgement form on file before we'll create the LWIA 90 access. If they've already got an SDA on file from their initial IWDS, I may send an email to Carrie asking to verify that it's on file. It's not a big deal. We just need to make sure that it's there before we create the ID. The local system administrators should contact the IWDS system administrators at OET for any LWIA 90 user password resets or re-enabling disabled users with LWIA 90 ID. So because you don't have local system administrator rights in LWIA 90, you can't make the change yourself, but you're the only people who have the authority to ask Jim Potts or me to make the changes to the LWIA 90 ID. Any corrections being made to an LWIA 90 client application will need to be submitted to the IWDS system administrators at OET, Jim Potts or Chris Tynan. Any assistance with exits or performance on LWIA 90 clients needs to be submitted to the WIOA performance measure staff at OET, Mark Burgess and Paula Berry, with a CC to the IWDS system administrators, Jim Potts and Chris Tynan. When LWIA 90 users are no longer employed by the LWIA, or if they no longer need LWIA 90 access, you email the IWDS system administrators and the SDA liaison to inform us of the change so that we can disable the LWIA 90 ID. IBIS, Illinois Benefit Information System, is a program owned by IDES, the Illinois Department of Employment Security. It contains unemployment benefit information. To access the IBIS system, users need both a PKI digital ID and a RACF ID. It is a 2-ID system. Be happy, it used to be 3. Those of you who've been around a while remember the Citrix IDs. So I am happy that there are only 2 IDs necessary to get into this now. Request to add, remove, or reset passwords for IBIS users has to be submitted by the LWIA local system administrator to the IBIS coordinator. The only person at OET who is the IBIS coordinator is me, Chris Tylen. IBIS access is requested by the local system administrator by submitting to the Bureau of Agency Services ITM External User ID request form to the IBIS coordinator. So you guys get this form filled out, the user signs it, and you send it to me. The user has to have an IDES data sharing agreement acknowledgement form on file with the SDA liaison before IBIS access will be granted. These forms can be submitted at the same time. It is preferred that they are done in separate PDFs. Any changes to user information, their name, their work address, work email, work phone, should be submitted to the IBIS coordinator so that I can make the changes, and to the SDA liaison with a new form to update the user information. OET is only authorized to process IBIS access for LWIA employees, so your employees that are using the system for WIOA activities. WIOA and trade, but I don't think the trade really needs IBIS. But if they're not using it for WIOA purposes, we've had LWIAs contact us because somebody else working in their administration of whatever county they're working with, et cetera, wants IBIS for their job. Well, if their job doesn't involve WIOA, you need to tell them that they have to find another way to access it, and they need to probably talk to IWDS, the state agency themselves, because I'm only authorized to grant IBIS access requests for WIOA purposes. Generally, if they don't have an IWDS ID, I'm not giving them an IBIS ID. Once the IBIS coordinator receives the completed signed form and verifies the user has an SDA on file with the SDA liaison, then I submit to the RACF security group to have a RACF ID created. The IBIS coordinator only submits to the RACF security group once a week. This was at their request so that we can keep things organized. And I usually send those in on Friday afternoons, or if it's a short week, whatever the last day of the work week is, or if I'm taking time off, like if I'm taking Friday afternoon off, I submit it Friday morning. If I'm taking Friday off, I submit them on Thursday. I generally let you guys know if there's something like that is planned. Obviously, sometimes things aren't planned. If I end up with a sick day on Friday, I turn them in on Monday. But I try to do everything on the last day of the work week every week. After the RACF security group issues the RACF ID, then the new RACF ID has to be submitted to another security group at IDES that assigns the IBIS access right to that newly created ID. Once that is completed, they let me know, and I have to wait 24 hours, and then I send an email back to the local system administrator with the different attachments detailing how to reset the password on the new RACF ID, any changes that need to be made to the Microsoft Edge browser for IBIS users, instructions on how to log into IBIS with your new IDs. And now I've actually got a new PDF that's going to be included today that's part of my toolbox, that some of these, you need to let your IT coordinators know to whitelist certain URLs in order to access IBIS. We also have another PDF that came out in the last month that I sent out at the beginning of November, because now the URL to access the screen to change your password requires a browser setting change in Microsoft Edge. So you have the Neon Web update, the whitelist update, the Edge browser update. So there's a whole mess. I think right now it's 5 PDFs that I send you that I call the toolbox that your user has to do in order to be able to use the IBIS system. The other thing to stress to them, they have to use Microsoft Edge. IDES has not designed their program to work with any other browser other than Microsoft Edge. It was Microsoft and Internet Explorer, and now because Internet Explorer has been retired, they've been forced to go to Edge, but we still have to make some browser settings in Edge to make it work like it's in Internet Explorer. Trust me, I have more of a headache over this than you guys do. This process, ideally, you give me the rack app submission form. It's got everything filled out properly. I submit it on Friday. I get a new rack FID on Tuesday. They send it in. The guy says that he's got it. I get an email Thursday morning saying that the security issues have been updated. The user will be good for Friday morning. And then on Friday afternoon, when I do my submissions, I also send out the new user letter back to you. In a perfect world, you submit to me on Friday and I give you the ID back the next Friday. It's not always a perfect world. Sometimes it can take 2 weeks. If there's vacations going on at either one of the two security groups, it can take 3 weeks. So as I've kind of detailed to the rest of you guys, if you submit to me by Friday morning when I come in at 9 o'clock, or when I start working on these things at 9 o'clock, even sometimes if you get it to me before noon, I'll submit it that Friday, and then you can expect that you'll probably get the ID back the following Friday. But if you don't, I wouldn't worry about it until we hit the 2-week mark. Then it's late. 90% of the time, you're going to get it back in 1 week. If it goes over 2 weeks, that's when you start getting worried and you say something to me. And there's been a couple of times where I didn't see the application. I missed it in the email, or it went to the spam folder. Or in a couple cases, when they sent me the email, it only had 3 of the 4 users they wanted to add on the attachments. There wasn't the 4th one on there. Mistakes happen, my end, your end, that's life. But if you didn't get it within 2 weeks of submitting it to 2 Fridays of submitting it to me, let me know. I'll look at it, we'll see what's going on, and we'll try to get it fixed. The IBIS access, the form is a sample right here. You have to mark that it's a new ID. You have to put the person's name, their work address, city, state, zip code, the phone number for their work, the LWIA number. You mark that it's for request access to IMS, TSO host, and you put that over here because all they're going to get is inquiry access. They're not going to get the update. This is the one that causes the most trouble. The digital certificate ID username. This is not their IWDS ID, and the first thing you need to tell them is that if they don't follow the PDF for getting the PKI digital ID from the DOIT, D-O-I-T, department with the state of Illinois, if they didn't use their driver's license, they didn't do it right. It requires your Illinois driver's license to get a digital ID. If they are not an Illinois resident, those of you who live on the borders, there are other instructions, but you will need to contact me and I will need to put them in touch with someone at DOIT to get them a PKI digital ID with an out-of-state ID. So I send you a PDF that specifically says how to get this PKI digital ID. They have to go to the Department of Innovation and Technology, DOIT, and they create their own ID. It's not assigned. They pick the ID. If they want to say that they are Super Fun Guy 27, then that's going to be their digital certificate ID. If they want to say that they want to use first initial last name and have it be the same as their IWDS ID, as long as it hasn't already been taken, that's fine. They get to pick it as long as it's unique to the system. If someone else already beat them to it, then they have to pick something else. But your users need to understand that this is not their IWDS ID. It is a completely separate step they have to do on their own. No one can do it for them. And they're going to need their state of Illinois driver's license in order to do it. They will be going to this link. This is part of the PDF that is also in my things that I send you. And it says they have to go to this URL, and it even says right here, if you have problems, do not contact OET. You have to call the help desk, just like this information over here, at either the 217 number or the 312 number to get assistance with a digital ID. I can't help you. No one at DCO can help you at all when it comes to problems with your digital ID. If the person needs a reset for their RACF IBIS password, and that is the ID that starts out MHD and then 4 numbers. The local system administrator has to email the RACF ID in question and the user's name, Joe Smith, and it's MHD 1234. I then look in my database to make sure that Joe Smith is actually assigned RACF MHD 1234. Maybe his RACF ID is actually 2345 and he's just been typing in the wrong one, and I need to make sure he's using the right ID first. If the ID and the name match, then I submit for a password reset. I have to submit that to the DCO RACF security group. In a perfect world, he responds to me in under 2 hours. If he's busy, pulled onto another project, on vacation, out sick, we may not get the password reset back for 24, 48 hours. Sometimes there's a person who covers for him, and then we have to wait till that person has time to actually do it. Paul, is on the PKI digital ID, I believe the driver's license has to be current and not expired. It has to be non-expired with Secretary of State. I think there's some kind of pass-through there from conversations I've had with staff at Do It. And a state ID can work as well. If they have an ID, they should probably, if there's no instructions on the PKI digital ID website for Do It, they probably need to call the help desk and say that they don't have a driver's license, they have an ID. I think all that will happen is that the letter needs to be moved from the front of the ID number, or from the back of the ID number to the front, just like a driver's license. But I'm not 100% sure. It's not my agency, not my monkey, not my circus. I would just say that if that's a case where they've got a state ID, they should probably call the help desk number and ask for help from Do It. Okay, so I submit for the password reset. We get it back as quickly as they get it done. It's not something I do myself. I am not the RACF security group. I am more of a gatekeeper. But I am only authorized to submit RACF requests for people who are using it for IBIS. If somebody is using RACF, an MHD ID, and they need it reset because of GRS or SNAP or any other state of Illinois program that's associated with the RACF ID program, I don't have the authority to request the reset. When you send it to me, you have to say that this person's getting the reset for IBIS purposes. The website ending with web 3270 still work to reset RACF passwords. That's what I was talking about earlier when I said I sent out that Neon Web PDF. They prefer that everybody try to do things on the website through the link, which I put in all password reset emails as well as the PDF. And you need to do the browser setting changes in order for it to work now because of something that changed the first week of November. You can still go into the IMSH system, the old mainframe where it's a black screen with the green letters, and you have to do the old mainframe programming and type in IMSH enter, and you have to do backslash FOR space sign on. You can still do things in the mainframe system as well, but they've tried to make it easier with the web web-based RACF reset URL. Now, when you do receive a temporary password back, it is supposed to be only good for 48 hours. I have conflicting information where one guy swears that it's good for 2 business days and it doesn't count Saturdays and Sundays. But I've had a number of you guys where I've given you a password reset on Friday, and Monday morning you're emailing me for another password reset because the user's saying it didn't work. I personally think it's a straight 48 hours. I don't think it's business. I think if I give you a password reset on Thursday or Friday and they don't do it on Thursday or don't do it by Friday, it's not going to work on Monday. That's just my personal belief, but you know, I'm not 100%. The IBIS user gets an error message saying that the RACF ID is expired. That's good. That means that they can go in and they can change the password without having to request a reset from me. It just means that you've been between 30 and 34 days since they last changed their password. You can go in and change your IBIS password at any time you want just by going to this link for the Neon Web, and you can change it 20 days, 25 days, 5 days, as long as you know your old password and your new password, and you enter your new password and it meets all the requirements. You can do it anytime you want, just as long as it hasn't gotten to the bad setting, which is suspended, meaning you no longer can reset it yourself. However, users cannot change the password from the IBIS website. You have to go to this other website location. This is an example of how it looks when you're doing it from the Neon Web location. The Neon Web location has you entering your MVS user ID, which is your RACF, MHDXXX, your old password. Now, if you've contacted me asking for a password reset, your temporary password is now your old password. The other one you had in there is gone. So they generally do the 4 seasons of the year, a pound sign or an @ sign, and then the month and year. That's their standard procedure. So for example, if you'd asked for a password reset from me in July, you'd have gotten SUM pound sign 0723 as the temporary password that was issued. So that goes in the old password. The new password is your new one that the user is creating themselves. I recommend something that you can increment and has to have a symbol. So I do a 6-letter word, flower, turtle, coffee, pound sign 1. And then when you do the next one, do pound sign 2, pound sign 3. My personal one is 5 letters because I do 5 letters, pound sign 01. I'm now up to 5 letters, pound sign 23, I think. Just because I've had the RACF ID for a long time. I just got tired of trying to remember what it was and went with something I could increment. So, like we said, this is your RACF ID. This is the temporary password you've been issued, not the previous password that the user had. This is the #1 mistake that they make when trying to do a new password from a password reset. They need to understand it is the temporary password you just got issued. These are the things that have to be followed in order to create a new password in IBIS that counts. The password has to be exactly 8 characters. It has to have at least 1 letter. It doesn't matter if it's capital or lowercase. It's not case sensitive system. It has to have 1 number between 0 and 9, and it has to have one of these 3 special characters, and only these 3. Pound sign or hashtag, depending on how old you are, $, and the @ sign. Those are the only 3 symbols they can use. They can't use an exclamation point. They can't use a question mark. They can't use the ampersand. It's only these 3. Cannot be your first or last name for the user. Cannot be an abbreviation of a month. Cannot be something they used in the last 12 months. I highly recommend that you pick something that is incrementable just because it makes life easy. When they are successful, they get this message: MVS password changed successfully. Deactivating an IBIS user. Once again, like we talked about earlier, if the IBIS user needs the access disabled, whether it be that they left your employment or that their job no longer needs an IBIS access, you are to email me, the IBIS coordinator at OET. I create the deactivation request form from my user database, and I submit it to the DCEO RACF security group on Friday at the same time that I submit for the new users. One exception. If you've got somebody that you think I need to deactivate immediately because you're worried they're going to use the access and get into IBIS after they've left your employment, and you want to make sure their access is removed, I will turn around and request a password reset immediately after you tell me to do so. And then when the password's reset, they can't get in anymore. And then I deactivate the whole ID on Friday. When the OWIA employee leaves your employment, the OWIA must notify the IBIS coordinator and the FDA liaison as soon as possible. It could be a violation of the data sharing agreement if a user accesses IBIS that's no longer employed by your OWIA. In 13 years that I've been at DCO, it happened one time, and it was not good. They were trying to look up former employee spouses, former coworkers, their boss. They were looking at information in IBIS about their wages and their jobs. Yeah, there's a lot of things in there that somebody can violate, and when they're looking around at stuff and they shouldn't be. So if you've got somebody who has left your employment, it is imperative that we get their access removed as soon as possible, especially if you think that they're that type of person. Now, talking about IES. IES is newer. I think everybody is being switched over to IES now instead of SNAP. If you're one of the few OWIAs that have not moved over to IES yet, let me know and I'll get you in touch with Carrie Compardo, and you probably need to get moved over. It's a computer-based public benefits application and management system joint initiative between HFS and DHS, where users view client eligibility information. You're able to see all benefits involving medical, SNAP, and TANF for at least the last 12 months, earned and unearned income used to determine benefit eligibility, client notices, dates, and family members included in the case. IES access is granted to OWIAs as a subcontractor to OET through a shared data agreement between DCEO and DHS. If you have any questions regarding your agency's access to the IES system, you need to contact the FDA liaison, who is now Carrie Compardo. Her information is listed at the end of the slideshow. IES has slightly different rules for the local system administrator. IES, in the last year, asked for a designated agency security administrator, or ASA, for each OWIA, and each OWIA is required to have 2 ASAs assigned. I know there are 4 OWIAs that are currently on this right now who only had 2 local system administrators, and one of them left in the last year. You guys need to make sure that you update with Carrie to make sure that you have 2 ASAs and 2 local. We strongly recommend 2 local system administrators so you have a backup. And if you only have 2 local system administrators for your whole OWIA, then both of you have to be the ASA. We want the ASA to also be an LSA. The ASAs are the only ones who have the rights to request adding or deleting IES users. And that's important because IES does not do password resets. So for those of you who have added new local system administrators and you've done it since we assigned the ASAs last year, more than likely coming up here soon, Carrie's going to be sending something out wanting to make sure that everybody's ASAs are current, and you have to have 2, just like we strongly recommend You have 2 local system administrators for IWDS minimum. All right, moving on. IES access is requested by the LWIA ASA to the OET SDA liaison. These are sent directly to Carrie. Each staff person from your agency who requests IES will need to have the signed IDES sharing data agreement acknowledgement form on file with the OET. They have to complete the system access request IL 444-2022 form. They have to review the HIPAA and privacy policy training for externals and the external security awareness training. They have to complete and sign the IES HIPAA privacy policy training attestation and the IES certificate of understanding. Both forms are to be signed by the user supervisor. Obtain an external ID, username and password, which is different than your PKI digital ID from IBIS. This is something with DHS. If you have any questions, go to Carrie, not me. And then you submit all those forms to the SDA liaison. Here's a copy of the current form, the IL 444-2022 form. The user completes the highlighted portion, signs the form, and then DCEO signs as the community provider. The ASA has to be the one who sends the request form and the HIPAA privacy policy attestation and the certificate of understanding to the OET SDA liaison. This form is required to activate, deactivate, and reactivate a user. Like I said, they don't do password resets. If you do not log into IES for 60 days and your password expires, then your access has been revoked. They do not do password resets. Make sure your employees understand that if they have an IES access. If they do not get signed in for 60 days, they're going to have to fill out the form all over again and resubmit as an activation to the SDA liaison. Creating the external ID. Each staff person from your agency requires access to IES will need to get an external ID at the Do It Identity Management website. This is a self-service management system that allows users to create an Illinois.gov ID and reset their account password. They will need to use the external user ID and password in order to log into IES. Creating the external ID. This is something Harry helped me put together for you guys as a reference. The URL is here. You click on the third option on the page. The information you enter has to match your driver's license exactly. It has to be your current driver's license. It cannot be expired. They're going to compare it against Secretary of State. Employees who do not have an Illinois driver's license are not eligible to register via this automated system. A state of Illinois ID card cannot be used here instead of a driver's license. You will need to notify your agency lead, who will then in turn notify their HFS or DHS liaison, and an enterprise service request will have to be created for an ID to be manually created for people who do not have an active Illinois driver's license. Do It requires an email address verification, sending the confirmation email when completed. The user clicks on the link in the email they receive, and they'll be returned to the Do It site to complete the registration form. Update user information name anytime there's a change. Name, work address, work email, work phone for IES. The ASA, LSA has to complete a new user access IL 444-2022 form and submit it to the SDA liaison. If the user email changes, they will have to create a new external ID, like we just covered, and submit a new access request IL 444-2022 form to become active in IES with their new email. Because of multi-factor authentication, it is very important that their IES account have an accurate work email. If users are required to change their password every 60 days, if they fail to do so, they will be locked out of IES and their status will change to inactive. Additionally, users who do not log into IES within 60 days automatically have their status changed. So if they don't update their password, they get locked out. If they don't log in at all within 60 days, they get locked out. If the user account goes to inactive, then the ASA LSA has to submit an access request IL 444-2022 form again to the SDA liaison to get the account reactivated. When the ASA submits the form to the SDA liaison for activation and reactivation, the SDA liaison has to submit it to DHS for them to process. SDA liaison and OET, we have no control over how long it takes for DHS to process this form and activate the users. As some of you very painfully know, it can take 2 months sometimes. It can take a week sometimes. But if it's been over 2 weeks, the ASA should email the FDA liaison and ask for an update. Sign into IES, the user has to enter the username, including the domain the user was given when the user obtained the external ID through Do It. Example, mary.smith@external.illinois.gov. The user also has to receive the system-generated notifications when the user's name was added to IES. The username from Do It should match the user ID in that email notification. If the names don't match, this causes an error and prevents you from logging into IES. Please notify the FDA liaison to correct this problem. If a user leaves, just like any of the other IDs, you have to notify us in a timely manner. However, this one goes one step further. This one you do have to complete an IL 444-2022 form to delete the user, and you submit it along with all the rest of the stuff that we'll talk about here, where you can do all deactivations in one shot. If you include the 444-2022 form with it, I'll make sure it gets to Carrie. If you don't, when I notify Carrie that the person needs deactivated, she'll email you and ask you for the form. And as a reminder, Kirsten will be sending out the link for this recording to everyone that attended sometime tomorrow. We'll make sure that these files are and the presentation slides are attached to the chat when I'm finished here, which hopefully should be in just a few minutes. I know we're running over. I apologize. Normally I run early. Summary. This is what I've been sending out to you guys as a PDF. I put how to create new users and how to deactivate users on one PDF. This is the new user. This is our current practices as of right now. When you're making a new IWDS ID, the FDA acknowledgement form is to be signed and sent to me, and I send it to Carrie. You also CC Patty Schnorr. When the FDA is approved, which from the moment you give me the form and I forward to Carrie, you're good to go. You activate the local ID. LWIA 90 requests come to Jim Potts and Chris Tylen. The DCO grant manager has to be CC'd on the email if you're the one submitting it. A new IES user, you submit those forms to me and I give them to Carrie, or you can submit them directly to Carrie and CC me now that we've gotten a little more used to the way it goes. I have an oversight responsibility over this, which is why I either need to be the one receiving them or at least be CC'd when you're doing it, just so that I've got the oversight and I'm keeping track of what's going on. And if Carrie runs into some issues with DHS, I'm the one who pulls out the big gun and goes to them and says, hey, I need this done now. So just keep me in the loop or just go through me and we'll make it happen. New IBIS user request forms come to me. When you're filling out the SDA acknowledgement form, make sure the LWIA provider and location are filled out. You would not believe how many of these get kicked back to you guys because that needs done. When you submit the form, please send the user email address and location address in the body of the email. Now, summary for deactivating users. If they had a local LWIA IWDS ID, you need to notify me with a CC to Patty, and you guys have to go in and disable the local LWIA IWDS ID and change the disabled reason to no longer employed by partner. I then notify the FDA liaison that that person is no longer active. If they had an LWIA 90 ID, you notify Jim Potts and me, and we take care of it. If they had an IES ID, you send it to me, and I send it to Carrie, or you can send it to Carrie and CC me if you want to take a step out of it. If it's IBIS, you need to notify me. I generate the form. You don't have to bother doing it. I take care of it for you. If they had WorkNet access, which almost every employee does, so just add this step when you're doing the deactivation. You include their name and email in the body of the email, and you include info@illinoisworknet.com, and they'll deactivate the WorkNet account. If they had EBS, which is also part of the WorkNet stuff, we follow those same instructions. We have to notify Illinois WorkNet, and you make sure that I know about it as well, so I can make sure that I'm taking care of it from my end to look to make sure that they've been deactivated. You can send one email to all necessary recipients to have deactivation from all systems with one email instead of having to do individual ones for each of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So once you get in the habit of it, it's pretty easy. An example of how to do it. Please remove user John Doe from IWDS, IES, and Illinois WorkNet, which would include EBS. His email was john.doe@weoworks.org. He's already been deactivated in IWDS. Thanks, LWEO LSA. Perfect, to the point, boom. I send it over to Carrie. Carrie may, if you don't already include the IL 444-2022 form for the deactivation in IES, she'll contact you and ask for it. But all the systems get handled in one shot this way, and you know it's done. Possible system misuse has happened 3 times since I came on in 2010 that I am aware of. If for any reason you suspect that one of your LWE employees or subcontractors is misusing their access to any system, IWDS, IWDS OEM 90, IBIS, IES, or even Illinois WorkNet or EBS, contact the system administrators for IWDS at DCO immediately. You send an email to Jim Potts and me. We will treat it very seriously and look into it immediately. Misuse includes accessing the system for outside employment, non-WEO related, or using the system to look up family members, coworkers, or celebrities. Yes. Sometimes your employees think that they can go look up Michael Jordan or Walter Payton or whoever the new star is, Oprah Winfrey. That gets flagged. They're going to get caught. We're going to know. These systems look for people looking up certain names. Michael Jordan and Oprah Winfrey, Sammy Sosa, Walter Payton, Brian Urlacher. Yeah, those are flagged. And if they get caught looking those people up, there are repercussions. Here's the contact information for the IWDS system administrators. These phone numbers have been updated. You've got Jim and me. I'm the IBIS coordinator. I'm right here. We have performance measure staff, Mark and Paula. SEA liaison, IES access. This is Carrie. Make sure anytime you're contacting Carrie about IES, you go ahead and CC me. Just make sure I'm on it. Anybody have any questions? I know we ran over by exactly the 15 minutes that the first presentation took up. I'm gonna watch here, see if anything comes up on the chat. You guys can always contact me directly anytime outside of this webinar to ask questions, or you can ask Jim Potts or Paula or Mark. You know, we're always available. That's what our job is. We're here to help make you successful so you can make your clients successful. When we all do our jobs, these people get the training they need, they get the services they need, and they get back to work. That's what we're all about. All right. We are going to go ahead and close this. If you guys need some of the download, if you can't get the downloads or any of the other things, if something happens where you're not able to get the stuff, or if you'd like some additional information, email me. I will get it to you as soon as I can. And thank you. I know this was my first time going through these updated ones. I'm going to need to streamline things here. I didn't realize the first one was going to run over like it did with all the new slides, but I think I added like 15 or 20 new slides to the first presentation. So I apologize to everyone for running over. I hope you have a wonderful Monday. And for those of you who I will see again on Wednesday morning, I will be rip, raring, ready to go and caffeinated when we start Wednesday morning with entities, locations, and contacts and relationships. So I will see you then. Thank you.